What happens when you take 50 hits of DMT in one sitting, step through the veil of reality, and come back with a message from God? Or something else entirely. Today's episode is a wild, human, and vulnerable ride into the heart of the psychedelic experience with Adam Butler, author of Butler's DMT Field Guide. I go deeper with Adam than any conversation I've had before about psychedelics. Adam shares what first pulled him into the world of DMT, not just curiosity, but a full-blown existential collapse that had him on the brink. We talk about how DMT quite literally saved his life, how it reshaped his sense of self, and what it's like to meet angels, demons, and entities beyond language, including the strangest ones he's ever encountered. We also dig into the now famous Johns Hopkins study about entity encounters on DMT and ask the question, why do so many people report seeing elves, aliens, and divine beings during their trips? Are these hallucinations, archetypes, or contact with some sort of shared reality? Adam also walks us through the cosmic twitch, his term for those fractal flickers of time and space that can rearrange your entire perception. We also talk about safety, integration, and even how DMT can open up new realms of connection and intimacy for when things get freaky. This isn't just a conversation about a drug. It's a deep dive into perception, identity, and the edges of human experience. Let's get into it. Adam Butler, thank you for joining me on the Zach Show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into our conversation.
Me too. And we're going to talk a lot about DMT and your psychedelic experiences today. But before we even get into that, there's something that you said on another podcast that just stuck with me. And I wrote this down because you had said that you got a tattoo on your chest a while ago that said, "Fuck love."
Yeah.
And this is, it seems so unhinged, but also so savage. And I'm someone who, hasn't even had the courage to sack up and get a single tattoo, even though I've had hundreds of ideas. So I just want to know, like, what compelled you not just to get a chest tattoo, but to write "fuck love" just
Ooh.
across the pecs?
So as my beard's now growing out, you can't see, but I got my own neck, my chest. Actually, as we're
Yeah.
getting right into this, I got my penis tattooed. I've got everything fucking
Oh
tattooed.
yeah.
Um, that's the first time I've ever said that on a podcast. But all of them were done to make sure I never forget that particular moment. And right before recording, excuse me, we were talking about how now I'm fully present and that I'm able to kind of sit and be with it. But at the time of really most of my tattoos, and including that one, um, I felt as though I really needed to have an indelible mark on me, so that way I never forgot the experience. Now, fuck love, and it's spelt backwards in big bold letters, so that way when I brush my teeth, like in the mirror, it's that way I can read it, fine. So
Mm.
it's still very clear what it says when I have my shirt off, walking at the beach. But um, it's when I this is kind of not difficult, but emotional to kind of get right into, because as much as it seems as an outward projection of like fuck the love of women, or fuck the love of the women that I perceive screwed me over, and part of my story is, I got a restraining order against me. I got kicked out of my relationship. I had several breakups that really affected where I was. Um, but ultimately now in 2020 hindsight, I can see that fuck love was really me not loving myself, not my ability to not know who I am, know myself, and ultimately love myself. And I've thought about altering that too, or adding something to say maybe like "fuck fake love," or add a period, and add something to it. But as of now, I've left it because I still wanna, as much as I've transcended that darkness of my life, I never want to lose the memory of exactly how I felt in that moment that I got that. And I think now,
Mm.
and maybe this is the first time it's happened. It's something that maybe will start a conversation where it'll lead to something like this. In addition to
Yeah.
the little old ladies at the beach looking at me, being like, "Oh my god." So,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you asking that, because it was a dark moment in my life, and now I can say my whole purpose is to share love, spread love, and I love myself in the world and people around me more than probably most, and that'll come out through this. But
Yeah, because I think it's a cliche to see a wild tattoo or just like, you know, maybe a tattoo that draws upon certain emotions or you don't understand, and you look at the tattoo and your initial reaction might be like, why the fuck would anyone ever get that? Or like what not saying you specifically, but like what type of idiot would get like something like that across his chest or like face tattoos, whatever. But what always interests me and what I think about is there's a mind state where that person walked in to the tattoo shop, no matter how irreverent the tattoo seemed, where they walked in sober, under the influence, whatever it was, and they thought that this is exactly the decision that I want to make right now. That this moment in my life, this is the perfect thing that I want to put on my body. So I think that's why tattoos are interesting because it's kind of like uh, it is like kind of a Snapchat in a way where the tattoo doesn't go away, but like that initial intention might not resonate the same way it does with the person, so it kind of evaporates, but the tattoo is the thing that stays around. So it's almost kind of like a reverse Snapchat in a way.
Yeah, and I had my heart broken once again by my own self. Now that I can see that, but it was just something that I never wanted to experience that again, and I never will because, like I said, I'll never look at myself like that. But yeah, in addition to, I've got um, trust crossed out on my body. I have humans always lie and con written on my feet, on the faces of my feet. So when I take a shower, every time I look down and wash my body, I mean, not to get into all my personal shit, but I'm covered with reminders. But now, like on my butt cheeks, I have nothing happens by chance because I want to remember that, and I also have fuck it with a true exclamation, with a really just not fuck it like fuck my butt cheek, but real fuck it like
Yeah,
fuck.
it's not an
Fuck,
arrow.
no, no. And even my dad was like, "Oh man,
No, fuck this
you better
way.
hope you never go to fucking prison." Um,
Yeah.
but it really was just don't ever forget that the emotion of that when when you had that experience, and that particular one with the fuck it, nothing happens by chance. I was sitting at the table having a very emotional talk about mental health with my at that time 19-year-old, 18-year-old niece. ab- about the journeys that we were both going through, and we both really helped each other in that moment. And part of an asterisk of my story is that young lady's a huge part of it, and one of the reasons I'm still on this planet was because of the conversations I've had with her. So those are the little, it may only be a 10-minute tattoo, but now every time I look at my body, I'm instantly reminded of the progress and growth that I've been able to achieve, but also, don't forget those badges, and maybe that they truly are the Girl Scout or Boy
Yeah.
Scout badges of our life, and they're our soul sashes, so to speak. And man, wear those lessons with pride. Be-
What would you say it was more a collection of love related conquests that led up to that tattoo, or was there a specific moment where it happened and then you're like, all right, fuck this, like I'm getting the tattoo.
no, that was a very distinct moment. I mean, at that point, I had moved to a new house, a new job. I had just had two long-term relationships break up, and I was in a really bad funk, which ultimately led me to psychedelics, starting with shrooms and then DMT. But, um,
Mm,
and maybe just a fun kind of way of how this has all come around full circle is the other day I was walking in Boston with my girlfriend and another female friend that we had just kind of recently been befriending and working with professionally, and I was wearing a really bright fluorescent colored jacket, and she kind of laughed, busting my balls, being like, "That doesn't look like your jacket. What are you wearing? Your mom's jacket?" And I said, "I'm so glad that you brought that up because I was always when I bought that jacket, I had 2 options, that brightly colored one and an all black one." And I was in California, I was on my spiritual journey, and I'm sure we'll get into this, how I took a year off and then traveled the country
mm,
and really just lived out of my car and on the beach and all of that. But, I needed to get, a rain jacket, and I was always walking around with projecting such negativity and such darkness and wearing all of these nasty tattoos. And everywhere I went, I just was putting out this bubble of don't even fucking come near me. And I decided when I was buying that jacket, I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go with the fluorescent, corny, gay colored one. And, excuse my language if that offends anybody, but it was like such a change of everything that I was normally trying to project. And now I
yeah.
wear that bright colored jacket with such pride and I skip around like, once again, please come into my bubble so I can talk about this Coney jacket, and it's just a completely different mindset. So,
Yeah.
um,
And it is gay, and I support the meaning of gay as meaning stupid, because that was originally how the word first came into my life, with my friends calling me gay in middle school. So
not the
that
gay like the double dong dildo that you and Chris were talking about in the rocking chair on your
no,
couple
that's it.
interviews
That's
ago. That's a
That's
different
a
gay.
that's a different section of my gay kaleidoscope. It depends, which side of the light spectrum that's hitting me through the kaleidoscope at that moment. If I shift it a little bit, I can easily get to the double-sided
Mm.
dildo side. But
I think you said you also pissed in your mouth during the break on that episode too, if I recall.
I did.
So, yeah.
I thanked him for pissing in my mouth, and that's what good friends do. He gave me his life, or inspired by life story in a great fiction novel, and he needed a place to pee,
Mhm.
so I'm happy to provide that in return. I do want to ask you. I'm just thinking, like, we spent 3 hours just covering your tattoos, but we will move on. But before that, I gotta ask you about the penis tattoo. Like, how does that feel to get your dick tatted, and what was the tattoo?
Um, actually, of all the places, not all that bad. So it was the end
Really?
of a 7, 8 hour tattoo, so I had my whole lower abdomen done with a pretty gnarly Medusa face with really, like, red glaring eyes and all these funky spideys coming out of her head, and it ends with her mouth opening with her tongue coming out, and her tongue goes down I can't believe I'm saying this on a fucking podcast. Her tongue goes down the shaft of my cock, and, it ends in an anchor. So, pretty much if I'm making love or having sex or getting whatever going on with anybody, it looks like they have to look into the eyes of Medusa, and it looks like an ant is kinda getting in there. It's
So
a
the
pretty gnarly fucking tattoo.
so the tongue is the shaft,
Mm.
and then the tip is the anchor. It
It goes
turns
right
into
before the
it
tip, yeah. Well, so
right
now
before it turns into the anchor. Okay,
and that was
gnarly.
yeah, and the actual Medusa tattoo is, pretty significant. So, like I said, it was a long, long session, but as far as areas of sensitivity, like under your arm, back of your knee, like that was even seemed to be even worse. But and that
Wow.
that was one of those. I had given up on women. That was another kind of fuck love statement where it was not only do I have this image or the mythology on my body of it's going to turn things to stone if you look in the eyes, and if you even come near me or my energy in that way, um, it's going to be an interaction that's going to whatever leave you fucking
Yeah.
frozen. And even that was literally every time. Once again, every time I brush my teeth, every time I go to the bathroom, every time I take a shower and look at my feet, I mean, there's not one aspect of the day that I'm not reminded of that past. Now I can say, but once again, in the hindsight of what psychedelics have done, now that is all impressed upon my brain, my psyche, my consciousness, where I don't need necessarily those physical signs or reminders where I can kind of tap into the lessons a little bit easier. But yeah, that was a point in my life that yeah, it expresses a lot of darkness.
Yeah.
There's no other way of getting around it. Now, that being said, my next tattoos, and I still have some, space that I'd like to get covered. I think are going to be more on the theme of consciousness expansion, more on the realm of divinity and true power of our human body, not the perceived negativity and hatred and lack of love. And that's ultimately what it was. It's not that the things I were seeking weren't necessarily there. It's just I didn't have the ability to see it with all the bullshit and plaque that was bogging me down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll send you
And
not not the shaft one, but I can. There are ways of showing you, the
oh, I've had
manipulative.
I've had worse things sent to
But
me by
now,
friends. Just all the internet's full of all different kinds of things that will make people look at you with contempt and disgust, and some of those are definitely on my phone. But I was gonna say, like, with as much of the sentiment of, you were done with women, and you get the dick tattoo, and you're turning off a certain segment of women that would look at that and be like, that's disgusting. You're also opening yourself up to a whole nother segment of women that would look at a Medusa tongue with the anchor and be like, I'll take an anchor to the pussy. Like, that's I've been waiting for, I've been waiting to be the, the sea ground that someone can anchor into me, inside of me, and this is the thing I've been waiting my whole life to experience. So, you got both ends of the
Well,
spectrum for
it
sure.
and again, to see where my life has come, the woman that I'm with now, and that's a whole nother fucking topic that I haven't necessarily explored on other topics. The woman that I'm with now is currently married. I'm friends with her husband. He's cool as shit. I'm one of his biggest fans.
Oh wow.
So it went from extreme monogamy, jealousy. If anybody even looked or talked to my women, I would flip out because I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. To now, being able to maturely appreciate some of the pros and cons of a polyamorous relationship. And I can say now that the relationship that I'm in is coming on 3 years, and without graphic detail, exactly what you said. This now I'm with a woman who can't love, she can't wait to get anchored and get anchored quite
Yeah.
often, and it's now part of. We've turned it into our growth story, where now we're both helping people overcome their mental health issues, their darkness, their whatever. But yeah, now it's everything is come to a point where I can see now that it all happened for a reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, even that's a whole nother, like, what the fuck
Yeah.
type of.
No, I definitely want to get into that, but first, I think a good, no pun intended, anchoring point for this conversation would be what drew you to DMT. Talk to me about the path that brought you to DMT.
So I kind of mentioned about the darkness I was in. So I try to go over some of the details quickly because I don't want to necessarily embellish my personal story. And I feel as though, and I'm going to be 45 in a couple months, that anybody that's reached my age has certainly gone through their list of trauma bullshit stuff they need to come over. So I don't necessarily want to say that my specifics are all that important, but I do think it's important to know some of it to kind of get a perspective. So I really was the rich white kid from New England that had every possible advantage. I had one of my grandparents left me with a significant sum of money to start businesses when I was young, excuse me. I had amazing parents, still do growing up. I had multiple houses in my early 20s. I had a real estate investing business. On paper, I was making a shit ton of money. Um, I had 8 years of college. I was successful in pretty much every aspect of my life, and until it all came crashing down with in one knock of the door. And I go over how there was one moment that kind of set a cascade of my life just crumbling, and that cascade was a knock on my door getting a restraining order against me. And I was with a woman for almost 7, 8 years. We were in this beautiful 3-story Victorian right by the water. It was anybody's dream house. We had just finished putting significant amount of money into it. And
Mm.
again, I've been able to put some perspective in it, and it's tough for me to kind of reiterate that period in my life. But I was just a drunk, narcissistic, belligerent fucking asshole who because I was wealthy and on paper successful. I thought that was a pass just to be a douchebag to myself and the people around me. And now, I want to preface it with that I've never been in a fight in my life. I've never raised my hand to a man or a woman. So it wasn't a restraining order about physical abuse, but it was about verbal abuse, mental abuse, even honestly, just spatial abuse. I was using my energy and my power um, to try to bring her down to my
Mm.
level ultimately, which was not in a really good place. And
Was the restraining order from the your partner at the time, or was it from someone else
no, it was
towards you?
it was from her. So I had
Okay.
we had, like I said, been together for a long time. And I just got home from work like any other normal day, and I was going over my computer work, and I got, like I said, a knock on the door, and this guy handed me a piece of paper, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I'm like, "Did you read this?" He goes, "No, I don't read it. I just give it to you." And it was listing all of these things about how I had made her feel uncomfortable around her and her daughters, and basically was demanding me to vacate my property. And I'm like, "Well, what does this mean? Like, how much time do I have?" And he's like, "When I leave, you need to leave now." And I'm like, "Well, what the fuck?" I'm like, "You just told me my 8-year relationship's gone. I got to leave my house. My business is run out of this, and I don't even have time to pack. Like, I just got to leave." He's like, "Yeah." So I literally got a 55-gallon plastic, waste bag, and I threw what I thought was important and left. And that was right before COVID kind of hit. So that should have been just a 2 or 3 week process where at that point I was like, obviously the relationship's over. I that was like my 15th house, so I was like, I could give a fuck about the house. It was more just I just want to move on. But then COVID stalled that whole process for over a year, and that
Yeah.
drew it all out. but I was still blaming her. I still didn't have a I still hadn't done any shadow or reflective work. So there was a good year period where I was just walking around pointing fingers, looking for external solutions to my issues, drinking the whole time, being a douche. Um, but then, with like I said, within a year and a half or so, I met another incredible woman. Moved in with her. She had 2 kids. Fell in love. That whole thing again. That blew up and ended horribly. Once and I was in the same funk. Quit my high
Mm.
paying job where I was making about 180 grand a year. Um, Quit it
Whew.
because I was just stressed. But then got another even better high paying job out on the Cape where I was trying to build my next chapter, and then I had one of the owners of the company screwed me over 900 bucks, and I found it out, and I called him on it. And at that point I was just so short on everything that had happened to me, and I was like, I was kind of done with women. But then I felt, well, the guy wouldn't fuck me over like that, and I was just building this brotherhood of, we're making money, we're rolling, everything's good. I fit in, I thought, great to piece of this puzzle. And when I found out that had happened, I confronted him and I threatened to kill this guy, and it got really serious
Mm.
really quick. And it wasn't like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna punch you in the face and break your nose." I mean, I was visualizing literally ripping this guy apart, and luckily the owner was there, and he's a pretty big dude, and he was able to kinda keep it from getting too bad. But that guy lived 2 blocks from me, and that argument happened on a Sunday night. And the next Monday, I woke up that morning, and I was like, "You know what? I obviously don't have a job now. I don't have a place to live really anymore because I was living with the owner of the company, so I knew that was now fucking gone to shit." And I said, "Screw it. I'm gonna just drive to California and hug a redwood tree." And at that point, I had a good amount of money in the bank. I didn't worry about where my next job was coming from, and I just took off. And like I said, I lived for about a year just on the road, living in
Yeah.
out of hotels, living on beaches. And that whole time, and maybe long long way to get to how the fuck did I get to DMT? Um, right around that process of that gentleman kind of screwing me over, I was just starting to take ownership of what I needed to in life. I had just quit drinking alcohol, so now I'm 4+ years sober, and that's a huge, huge part of my story is getting rid of the alcohol and the abuse of alcohol. Um,
Mm.
but I realized that, what the fuck, Adam? I'm looking in the mirror. I'm fat. I'm out of shape. I've got every advantage in the world, but I've lost everything. And who am I to blame? And I'm trying to look at everybody of where I can throw my blame, and it was like, you have no one to blame but yourself, and you need to start looking within. And that was kinda right around the time, like I said, a few years ago, where psychedelics was starting to get some attention about therapeutic value, mental health. And I started exploring with shrooms for probably about 3 or 4 months, 5 months, going pretty deep, getting really good therapeutic value, doing my shadow work, really starting to understand where I needed to take ownership. But I didn't have this, like, life-saving or changing epiphany where everything was just kinda good. If anything, it was just more, shining a spotlight on all my shit, but it was more just realizing how much shit that I was in. And then
Yeah.
I had heard about the transformative power of DMT, read Rick Strassman's book, the Spirit Molecule documentary. I was immersing myself with as much information about DMT as I could, and then and how it normally does. DMT typically finds you when you needs it and need it, excuse me.
Yeah.
And I had a really close friend reach out to me and say, "I've got access." And long story short, we planned a day for me to explore that molecule, and that was the day that honestly everything in my life changed. And I can say that that's why I'm such a
There's
proponent of DMT, is that it really did save my life.
Yeah, there's a lot there
Yeah.
for sure, and I wanna go back. No, 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 it's good because it gives me a lot of
Uh,
directions to go. I wanna go back to the moment before, uh, you decided to go out to California on that 18th month road trip, but before I have, I don't need all the details about threatening to kill the guy, but one thing did pop into my head where if I ever got to the point, God forbid, that I threatened to kill someone, I at least hope that I'd have a sick line to say to them, like, "You're gonna be sleeping with the fishes, bitch," before you fucking, like, whip out a shotgun, just fucking, I just, like, I'd hope I'd at least, like, have some forethought. Did you have a line ready to go? Like, were you rehearsing it at all in the mirror before you went to this guy, or was it kinda just like a burst of emotion, not really planned out, just fucking, like, whatever came out, came out?
no, so we had planned the meeting. I actually had somebody, the owner's son, drove me there. So we're about 15 minutes from the office, and I knew I was shaking and already ready to fucking go. So I asked him actually, can you please
Mm.
go and drive me there? And he's also another huge jack dude. So I figured the more muscle there, probably the better for everybody involved. Um, I really, 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 in my heart of hearts, and I still have this like lingering question, like, well, how the fuck could that be? Was that I was going to bring information to the table that once it was shown that yes, indeed, this is what was happened, that everything that all the discussions prior were about character, integrity, about treating everybody like I'm going to treat this business like it's my own. And there was just no question of going away from that honesty and integrity of character that I thought we were all building this relationship on. So when I exposed and the fact that hey, like, I caught this guy in a fucking lie for $900, I thought the owner was gonna kick him out, be like, "Fuck you," like completely take my side, and it was kind of just brushed off, like, "Yeah, well, what are we gonna? Not a big deal. I'll give you $900," and I did get the $900, and it was just kind of like, "Don't worry about it." And I was like, "Don't fucking worry about it. I've just given you my entire life of the past year learning your business, like, and I started getting emotional, and it just hit me really instantly, and it was just like, you know what? Fuck you. One of two things happen. You either think I'm a complete asshole and you have absolutely no respect for me and you think I'm a piece of shit and that you can use me, which if that's the case, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Or
Mm.
like you really like wanted or you are kind of a piece of shit. You are deceptive and like there was no real easy way out for him other than just to say, hey, I had a lapse of judgment. I'm really sorry. It'll never happen again. But he didn't. There was this smug look on his face, like, yeah, fuck you, and I'll do it again. And I hate to say it, like, because I'm not a big guy. Um, but he's, like a 140-pound guy, and I looked at him and I was just like, I don't know. I I don't even know what line I said. I
Yeah.
the energy that burst from me, I could only imagine what that room felt like, and, like I said, luckily it got squelched pretty quick because there were a couple bigger dudes there, and, yeah, within 12 hours, I was driving from the Cape to I drove 26 hours straight, and my first stop was Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, that's where I wanna dig into because a lot of people you know, that do have those threats of violence cross their mind. A lot of people follow through on it and they either, you know, kill someone or they severely injure them and then they spend a large portion of their life in and out of jail, they spiral. They don't take it as a sign of I need to just get away and figure shit out. So what do you think it was in that moment where you decided to get away from that situation and drive out to California? What do you think it was that sparked you to go down the path that would take you away from the blast point rather than just like fucking get sucked into a violent vortex?
I guess maybe I was more hurt than angry or belligerent. I was more just done with the fucking world. Just really hurt. Like I was crying in pain. Like how, like really just upset and um as much as there was violence in my mind, it was more and ultimately this was this whole internal conflict, which is do I really want to be on this planet anymore? That's where when I talk about, mental health and darkness, like, that's really a nicer way of just saying I was suicidal and I was really contemplating taking my life. And it wasn't and this was kind of even prior to that day. Well, it was prior to that day that it wasn't one bad event. It wasn't one thing. It wasn't one trigger. There was this combination of all of these events where I really had to sit there and decide and make a rational choice. Do I want to stay on this planet? And I felt as though that was my choice to make, and it was okay if I chose to end my life, and I had that full right, and I was going to take whatever time I needed to explore to get to the bottom of this. And that's where it took a year plus of that journey, and it took the friendship and love of a lot of family and friends, including my mother was there for every day on the phone trying to literally and figuratively talk me off the cliff. Um,
Mm.
and that's ultimately that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this story because there's a lot out there about the benefits of psychedelics, but there's some people that will only listen to the lab coat doctors and scientists. There are some people that will only listen to people that look like me and kind of have the experience of doing it on the road. And I want to just be able to share the light of on the message of hope and transformational change, and that it like and ultimately true. If I could be in that low of a spot with all of my advantages, once again, this rich blue eyed fucking white kid from New England that had everything, including money, including all of that. If I was at that low of a point where I'm thinking about not being on this planet, what about the people that actually went through some real hardcore shit, uh,
Mm.
and or didn't have all
Uh,
the advantages that I'd had? And I thought as though, if I can share my authentic, raw story about how, with every advantage, I fucking blew it, um, to maybe and then and not to say that I've got it all figured out and I'm some enlightened soul now, but I've really changed so much of my life that have allowed me to live a happy, content life, but then multiply that and share that to others. That it just gives me faith to keep telling these stories. But
yeah. Yeah, and so on this 18-month road trip, you mentioned you were doing shrooms at this point?
and DMT, yeah,
And so this is
and
post
ayahuasca.
first DM. Okay, so it was the full spectrum. So this road trip is post your first DMT experience.
Correct. So the proper timeline would be, when I finally broke up out of the two long-term relationships. I moved to the Cape, got the new job, and that's when I started exploring, and that's when I first quit alcohol. I realized
Mm,
that I needed to just get out of my system. That was not doing anything positive to me, and that was a really easy one to just flip the switch on. Uh, and then, like I said, there were several months that I was exploring the the shadow work with shrooms, and really unlocking a lot of stuff, and really, like I said, kind of take ownership for where I was in life. But it didn't open up the new compartment in my brain that I needed, or it didn't have that perspective shift, or the epiphany moment, or the removing of the veil, whatever type of analogy you want to use. I knew that I didn't have that shake. And before all this happened was that day that I did explore DMT, and it was shortly thereafter that that event happened with that guy.
yeah.
And it wasn't I don't it wasn't like DMT um made me have a less of a trigger, or like, if anything, I think if I hadn't done DMT prior to, I probably would have actually acted out and been physical with him. Um
Yeah.
but when I decided to hit the road, that's when I had already access to DMT, that I had been exploring shrooms, and like I said, I packed a backpack, took my credit card, a new pack of sneakers, a new pair of shoes, excuse me, and shrooms and DMT, and I hit the road. Now I did come back, to kind of check into my parents' house as home base, but
Yeah.
no, I did a
Phone,
lot of
wallet, keys, shroom, sneakers, DMT.
that was it.
Same thing.
Because
Yeah, that
fuck
was
it,
it.
and because I knew I
Yeah.
had a credit card and a bank account that I could, and ultimately I ended up spending probably 70, 80 grand, maybe 90 grand over the course of that, because I didn't fucking care. I didn't, if it was, I wasn't worried about debt or about making these payments back, because it was more, am I going to be here tomorrow? Am I going to
Yeah.
be here tonight? And, um,
Can you to zoom in a little bit, could you tell me the story of that first DMT experience? Because I think a lot of people have an idea of what a DMT experience is like through, either film or TV shows, or, maybe some YouTube videos that show like the very extreme experiences of DMT where people are like, there's a lot of like shitting pants and writhing out in the jungle. At least like that's kind of the things that have popped into my algorithm when I've searched it. But I think it could help a lot of people understand it, including myself, to hear what your first time was actually like and what that felt like for you.
so I think maybe the first thing to clarify and differentiate is the difference between smoking DMT, or vaping it, and then, like you're saying, people go in the woods and shitting and puking themselves. That's typically ayahuasca, or drinking or eating DMT brew. And there is a distinct differentiation between
Mm,
ayahuasca and brew, and I have recipes in my book, and I'm sure we'll get into that too. But
yeah.
drinking ayahuasca or consuming it like that, that's where you're typically purging, shitting yourself. It can last 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. You're really going through a very, very deep journey. And I've done ayahuasca a couple dozen times, and it's a very intense, journey. But the first time, and typically when I talk about my experiences, it's with smoking or vaping DMT. And I guess, as we're doing clarification, NN-DMT. So you hear people talking about 5-MeO DMT as well. And I personally have not done that. That is on my list of self-exploration that I want to do. Um, but yeah, so NN-DMT crystals is typically what I'm talking about when we're talking about these experiences. And With
Mm.
that, there is no puking or shitting yourself. It lasts 6, 7, 8 minutes of this intense situation, but then you're back to full lucidity. There's no hangover, and uh, that's probably one of the more miraculous or beneficial aspects of DMT is that short lifespan. And I think what attributes to that, and what also really attracted me to get into and exploring DMT, is which is also I think with a lot of the original work by Rick Strassman in the 90s, why he started exploring DMT, is the fact that it is endogenous. So that word just means that it's naturally produced in our own body. So not only within our human bodies, but my understanding is it's in all mammals and it's within thousands of plants and it's really ubiquitous throughout the animal and plant kingdom. Um, so because of that, it's very natural. Your body metabolizes it very easy, and that would be probably the biggest take home from my first experience was just how natural, innate, and how normal, as crazy as the sensation was, how not scary it was, and how comfortable I was kind of going back to my original innate state, not being poisoned like LSD or shrooms would be.
Mm.
So yeah, if
S- So you just to go back to that, the first hit, I guess it would be, and vocabulary wise, when you say like if I say first DMT session, is that would you consider that a series of hits, or is that like the whole smoking session in itself? Just so I could ask you better questions about it.
no, and thanks, actually, thank you for asking and clarifying that because I think it is important. Um, And I mentioned in my book about that first day how I took about 50 hits. And I know there's a
Mm.
lot of people that would probably be like, no fucking way, that's bullshit. But it's because I did span that out over 7, 8 different sessions. So the normal kind of thing that you'd hear from Terrence McKenna or from the typical, psychonauts that are exploring DMT is you try to take 3 or 4 hits. You try to hold them in as long as you can. And if you can take one more hit, if you really want to blast past that boundary, always try to take that one extra pull. But there is that fine line of microdosing DMT and kind of just getting that vibratory hum and doing a full blast off. And that's why that first day, um, I sat with the molecule for an hour and a half and did multiple sessions, and each session was multiple and several hits. But
Okay.
and if I could, I think it's important to show or to talk about the transgression of that day because it really did go from being comfortable in exposure to it to really having that epiphany moment. Uh, And I mentioned how I started with the shrooms first. For me, I thought that was important because I felt comfortable being in the psychedelic space. I felt comfortable being in my body when my physiology was altered and my consciousness was seeing different things. I think that prepared me to get into the DM space a little bit easier and I hadn't done psychedelic for 20 years of my adult life. So, if I think I would have just jumped into DMT, it may have been a little bit more shocking, but the
Yeah.
the work
So you had a lot of experience prior to it with
well,
mushrooms or
several months of
LSD,
mushrooms.
other psychedelics.
Yeah, and LSD when I was younger in college. But I was going with shrooms 6, 7 grams. I was going pretty deep and
Oh,
really trying
wow.
to explore where what my issues were. So at that point though, I
So
knew
a hero's heroic dose, go blowing past the like you were
way more than an eighth.
comfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah, you were comfortable, being in those psychonautic realms. You weren't just starting with DMT,
no,
off the rip. Like you had some good knowledge and experience first.
and I think experience is a better word than saying I was comfortable in that space because it was horrifying. I mean, I was crying buckets and buckets of tears as I was reliving my trauma that I knew, trauma that I didn't know. What was these? I told you about all of my advantages growing up. So why did I have all of these insecurities and all of these mental things that were rattling on in my brain? So it wasn't easy doing that shadow work, but I felt as though I was on the right path to getting the answers of myself. And that, I knew it wasn't going to be from some therapist or just reading another book, that the answers that I was seeking really needed to come from within. And I guess maybe that's what the shrooms opened my eyes to, was that the answer is going to be within, and it's an external exploration of your consciousness, not learning more externally or finding some guru or mentor or so I think the connection to my body with shrooms really set the foundation for my comfort in
Mhm.
exploring DMT.
Yeah.
Um, So that first day was really set aside. My buddy and I had, his apartment set up. The intention was there. The environment was conducive for what my plan was, and he knew really what a shitty space I was in, and it really was. If I don't get some sort of answer from the universe, I'm fucking out. Like I'm not going to be here anymore. And so that first hit, and that I think is important because it really did feel natural, innate, and it brought me back to something that I felt as though I remembered from my childhood. And that, again, this is that endogenous thing where there was this nasal cavity sensation, excuse me, where it opened up in the back of my head, and there was like this dripping that was happening, and it was a combination of the vapor that I smoked, but also something releasing in my brain. And like I said, it wasn't like my human senses were being um, altered or messed up with or poisoned. It felt as though
Hmm.
something was being removed and I was being exposed to more information, more data points, more senses, more just of the truth of what this reality was. And as much as it was kind of sit back and say, "Oh shit," I wasn't scared. But it was kind of sitting in this 3D IMAX of sensation of sights and sounds that were all kind of morphing and moving, a very distinct physical vibratory hum. So that's something that you feel throughout your entire body. Every cell, every synapse, every literally every molecule in your body feels this vibratory hum and sensation.
Is this still off the first hit?
And yeah, pretty much instantly you're kind of
Wow.
getting that hum. But that's different from the blast off and interacting with entities. And so really that
Yeah.
first session was, I think, 3 or 4 hits, and it was more just kinda sit back and, "Okay, this is what it's like to be in this DMT realm." But I was an observer. I wasn't interacting with any entities. I certainly wasn't getting any messages. I didn't have any epiphanies. It was really just kinda sitting there and seeing what this world around me looks like while, altered on DMT.
Did you see within that first session, did you see the, entities or sort of archetypes that people talk about and choose not to interact with them? Or was it just that you weren't seeing them at all?
No, that entire day, even that last session where I had my epiphany, it was not an interaction with any entities. That didn't happen actually until dozens of sessions after, days and,
Mm,
months
gotcha.
after. It was more the kaleidoscopic movement of, and Alex Grey is probably one of the most popular artists that produces kind of psychedelic-like scenery. It would really be, like Alex Grey type art, but moving and mixing and this really just dynamic morphing. One thing I would say, and that I think is really maybe different with DMT, is that you hear the comment that it's more real than real, and even Strassman's volunteers in the '90s. That was one of the things they kept coming back with, is that they felt as though that their senses were really getting more data points, not less. And the crispness and clarity and intention of that DMT space, I think, is very unique to, than to other psychedelics. That there's an
Hmm.
intention behind it, and there's a physics and a movement that is not there. Like if you were on shrooms and you saw the wall melting, or a whale come out of it, or whatever, you're looking at the floor and all of a sudden a princess starts talking to you. You can kind of still know, well, that's the floor, but my mind's on shrooms and that there's just some weird kind of object coming out of it. Where in DMT,
Yeah.
it seems like its own distinct space. Um,
Do you know if there's ever been any studies done with people who are actively on DMT where they're testing out the more real than real theory with the senses? Like if DMT heightens your auditory senses in any way, or maybe you have better vision, just like things that you could actually check with, something like an fMRI brain scan or anything like that.
yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting work now going with into the DMTX, it's called, so DMT Extended State, where so instead of going in and smoking it and having a 7-8 minute session, they're doing it intravenously, where they're allowing people to get into the state and stay there for extended periods of time, and they're trying to kind of map that area, that they're trying to see if they can come back with some similarities. But there is uh, the one of the books I mentioned in mine is Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he has a lot in his book about just the natural physiology of the brain breaking down things like serotonin and melatonin to make your own DMT, and that your body is actually can get into its own meditative state where you're kind of pulsing your body to do all these crazy things. So there's there's scientific studies that prove your own endogenous created DMT can get you into all of these, elated states. There hasn't been so much, and I think it's just because of the legality of doing the studies of what happens to your body when you're in this state. But
Hmm.
that is getting more attention, and there's a lot more. Uh, I don't know, like Empirical College out in London is doing a bunch of work.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on with some great scientific minds that I think are pushing the boundaries. So hopefully there's going to be more out there.
Yeah, as it becomes, less destigmatized and, we come out of the fog of the, post 70s Puritan view of psychedelics in general, where any association of it is it's somehow gonna, wreck your brain or shatter your brain beyond repair. And there's certainly risks that come along with psychedelics, but there are risks that come along with any drug that scientists study. So it's nice to uh it seems like we're heading towards a place where we're gonna figure out what a lot of psychedelics, including DMT, are really capable of, as more money can legally go towards testing these things out in science.
I agree. And for me, I'm using the door of mental health and suicide, and coming from a rawness of sharing my story to open up that door because I, there's very few people, and I think if you look within your inner circle, you don't have to look too far to find somebody that's struggling with mental health or suicide ideation, or somebody that's even lost a loved one. And to know that there's so many data points showing that psychedelics and a whole range of psychedelics can help a whole range of people. I think that story and narrative isn't going to go away, and now it's getting some attention to say, hey, there are real benefits here. So
Mm,
I think if people just take a hard look at the people around them and the benefits that they've seen, like my mother's a perfect example. She's not going to go out and do DMT, or is going to be tripping on shrooms, but when she talks to my aunt and uncles, or when she goes to get her hair done, I think she's conveying my story in a way that will have a ripple effect. And there's the
yeah,
other side of it too. We talk about the mental health and the ability to help therapeutically, but then there's the whole, how can it expand just human consciousness? How can it be used to our benefit? And there's a lot of data points on that side too that collectively, I think people are getting more open to it because it's certainly not prescription pills. It's certainly not big pharma. It's certainly not drowning it in alcohol. It's not running from shit and sweeping it under the rug. And it's like psychedelics allow you to hold up that proverbial mirror to solve the actual problem, not just mask it. And I think
yeah,
the more and more people that share their stories, and it's amazing how it resonates with people that I wouldn't think. And they're like, some little old lady, she's like, "Oh yeah, I use shrooms all the time." It's like, really? And it's like those stories need to get
yeah,
out because it'll help the other little old ladies that maybe need it too.
yeah, yeah. I want to go back to the first experience with DMT, because you mentioned coming into the space with the first session throughout that experience where that sort of low vibratory hum starts, and then you didn't consider that the blast off. How did that experience progress as you moved through those? I think you said it was 6 or 7 complete sessions that day. I'm super interested to hear how that journey was for you.
So after that first full session of 3 or 4 hits, I sat back, and after feeling not afraid, feeling comfortable, feeling that this was a space that I was welcomed in, but once again, no entities, no interactions. So I pushed it a little bit. And now, once again, the beauty is it lasts 7, 8 minutes. You come back, there's no hangover. You can kind of integrate what you've experienced. But at that point, I wasn't just there to see sights and sounds. I was really looking for some sort of information. Pushed it again, maybe another hit or two. Explored that space. Once again, all the spinning mandalas, the sights and sounds, the vibratory hum, but no interaction, no entities. Pushed it again, and now we're going about an hour into it, and I I felt once again there was no bad interactions, but it was more just me going further and further into this space, but not getting any answers.
Mm.
And I say that
When you say you felt welcome, what does that mean? Was it a vibe? Was it things you were seeing? Was it a sensation?
it was the internal gut feeling that you would normally have, where I wasn't scared. I didn't feel like I had any negative energies, there to attack me. It was again, I think this is because it is a natural molecule in our own body, was that it was exposing me to a normal state.
Mm,
It wasn't like, "Oh shit, I'm doing shrooms and now that poison's getting to me," or, I just took a dose of LSD and now that poison's starting to affect my physiology and I gotta kinda hold on for it. It was more like, "Oh, this is what it's like to be a human." Lean it
yeah.
gave me more desire to lean into it, not pull away from it, and so that's why I felt it as though it was comforting.
You felt like it was enhancing existing sensations or existing aspects of being
100%.
human rather than manipulating or completely turning sensations on their head where it doesn't feel like human experience.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. So not only the senses that we normally have were more clarified and more sensitive, but then, yeah, there were new inputs that were being added to that. But again,
Okay.
there was no life changing, there was no talking, there was no interaction. It was more just I felt that my body could at least handle this molecule and just keep resonating, vibrating, and see what happens. But now, like I said, an hour plus into it, and I'm not necessarily getting answers. I'm kind of looking at my buddy, being like, "Fuck, is this a bust?" Like, I'm really, I gotta figure out something. And so that last session, and I every session prior, I really did have a plea to the universe. I did set my intention. I did kind of say my prayers. But this last one, I really kind of put it out there and asked sincerely with authentic, desire. Can you please show me something? Can you please, so I don't have to walk off and literally walk off into the woods and not come back? Like, I really, can you just give me a sign that this isn't all fluff? That Joe Rogan and Rick Strassman and all these people aren't talking fucking shit. Like, I really thought that this was gonna help. And that's when I had that life-saving epiphany that last time. And I want to state too, it wasn't an interaction with entities. It wasn't interaction with the mantis beings or the machine owls,
Mhm.
and I've had all those, and we'll get into that. It really was a conveyance of information. It was like a DNA download. It was an upgrade of information that instantly made sense. And this is where I mentioned how I really resonated with your a couple guests ago's Chris Cooper, and about how
Yeah.
a lot of his experiences brought him to this epiphany of just enjoy the moment, enjoy the now. And the best way for me to describe what happened that last blast was I took 7, 8 pulls. Like, I really went deep, deep, deep. And all of the vibratory hums stopped. All the sights and sounds stopped. There was no input of senses. It really felt like I was just suspended in space. And then there was this conveyance of information. And again, it wasn't English speaking guy. It wasn't any of the other weird stuff that I have interactions with. It was just this conveyance of knowledge. And the best way for me to describe it was I was so caught up in my past with all of my advantages, all of my prior successes, all of the shit that I've done. But how could I be in such a fucked up space? And now look at all the damage that I've done. And what am I going to do in the future? And I had all of these proverbial dots that I was just driving myself nuts trying to connect. And it was driving me nuts, and it was driving me to be anxious and suicidal. And um, in that instant, that entity or that conveyance was like, "Listen, you want me to connect all of these dots that are driving you nuts? Look, here they all are." And instantly there was this kind of connective field. But then those blew up, and it was like, "All right, now you have a million dots that need to be connected." Those were instantly connected. Those blew up, and it was like a billion, then a trillion. And the conveyance was like, "You stupid human, the point isn't to connect all the dots, to make sense of every connection. It's really to appreciate each individual dot. It's to appreciate the space between the beat. It's to appreciate just being right fucking here, right now." And that certainly didn't solve any of my external problems, but I instantly, once I had that realization that I needed to take control of my own life, that I had the ability to stop the rattle and chatter in my brain, and that I didn't have to have all of these things happening, that changed my perspective on how I then, with the spotlight shined on all of my internal issues that the shrooms, kind of put the spotlight on. Now I could finally kind of put them in the right compartments and understand how prospectively I needed to address this. And I came out of that crying my eyes out, so full of gratitude, knowing that, all right, this is something that I think I can handle. Now, that was prior to the road trip. That was
Mm,
prior to that snap moment, but I was on the verge of taking ownership of my issues. And then shortly
yeah.
thereafter was the incident with that gentleman, and I call him a gentleman now. If I ever saw him, I'd ask for his forgiveness. and it was a good year of exploration of DMT, ayahuasca, shrooms, where I was able to really put everything in my life in perspective. And I came back with the desire to write that book as part of my therapy, but then also to share it with others. And that was published in March of 2022. So now it's been excuse me, March of
Yeah.
2023. So just a little over 2 years. And
Yeah.
now I'm still trying to figure out what I do with my life. I'm certainly not going back to the rat race where it's all about money and things and material shit. Um, but now, yeah, it's trying to rebuild
Wild ride for sure.
all this crazy shit. But it's yeah, it's connected me to so many
Yeah.
beautiful people, to source, to
Yeah.
experiences like the Monroe Institute. All this crazy shit that's happened to me now, and it's all because of how DMT allowed my brain to have it, like I said, open different compartments, put the right compartments in, and since that day, uh, like I said, 2+ years ago, coming on 3 years, I've done DMT hundreds of times, and my experiences have really changed and progressed to, the whole realm of entity interactions. And there are some kind of categories that I think fit pretty nicely with what other people are kind of seeing. But I've also had interactions with what I consider my future self. I felt as though I had a pretty fucked up interaction with like an alien abduction type thing, which I think there's some
Mm.
correlation there. And yeah, there's they've changed quite a bit over the past few years, and I'm still exploring kind of what information comes from it, including now there's like this DMT laser experiment going on with this guy Danny Goler. I don't know if you've come across any of his stuff, but
No.
yeah, they found that if you look into into like a diffracted laser, there's this very distinct code that is not contained in the DMT space, but is exposed by it. And it's yeah, there's a lot of new kind of research going into that field, and so
So it's if you yourself are staring into a diffracted laser,
the reflection off
there's
a wall.
the reflection off the wall that it reveals something about the DMT space.
So yeah, he's got a documentary coming out called The Discovery, and like if you look
Mhm.
on YouTube, and he's got a channel called Dan Go Thoughts, where it's all these people that are doing it. So yeah, you ideally you smoke DMT to alter your state of consciousness, and it allows you, like we were discussing, input of different information. And with some practice, you can see. It kind of almost looks like Matrix, like the beginning of the Matrix movie. You have that running code like raining down.
Mhm.
It's like this code in the swirling matter of the
Wow.
laser. There's something that comes out of it, and he doesn't know what it is, what's it saying, but it's more of just the what levels of consciousness are
Yeah.
above just the human five senses. And I think DMT unlocks the human to vibrate and increase its antenna, so to speak, to take in a lot of stuff. But um, that's just
Go yeah, that no, that sounds fascinating. I will check out Dan Go for sure. You mentioned going off of the connections and the vibrations. Your last session of your first DMT experience, you mentioned the dots that you saw appearing or being connected, and that the message was I'm just paraphrasing to focus on the space between the dots and not the actual dots themselves. Did you see these dots or sense these dots appearing within the confines of the space that you recognized as your buddy's room, or was there nothing visually or perceptually recognizable? It was like a totally empty
yeah,
space.
this was a totally empty space, which was weird because typically
Wow.
there's such a sensory overload in that DMT space, and that's why that. Oh, this is something different. The universe was giving me what I was asking for, and it really was. If you could spend your entire existence trying to find the connectivity between the dots, trying to connect everything, and that was really the point, was that you're missing the dots. You're not appreciating the dot. You're not there for that split second if you're trying to connect this second with the past and the future. And it was the ability to really just to not focus on the connections, but to actually focus on the substance, the meat, the here and the
Yeah.
now. And it
Yeah.
was
And you
really
use the
profound.
yeah, you also use the word DNA downloads, which I find fascinating. Do you mean that in a literal sense or metaphorical sense, or a combination?
So, trying to just describe how these different effects happen. So, distinct from what I would say I had a hardware upgrade and it like different from a software upgrade. So, when I say a DNA input, it's because it's not conveyed through normal learning. It's not through listening to a guy tell you something or from reading a book or from listening to something. And that's where I'm trying to, and I don't necessarily have the words for it, but it's not a sensory information input from our normal five senses. So then what is it? Like somehow, some way, energy and information is being conveyed to me. So, that's one of the, I guess, colorful ways of trying to describe how it was because you're getting this instantaneous multiplication of knowledge or information instantaneously. So it's not something that you have to, I don't know, like finish the chapter and then review. So and that
Yeah.
and it's
It's not like a studyable knowledge to you, like
no,
to your it's something that you perceived, but you couldn't write it down in a textbook. It's something that you intuitively feel
and once
that
it's
is
there, it's
true.
there. Whether it be a scar on your skin or whether it be, if you upload a computer app or a program, it's there. And I feel as though these systems, and maybe it is from like a neurological standpoint, is it truly new synapses being made? And you hear the terms neurogenesis and neuro or synaptic, growth. Maybe it is that's what it is. Maybe it really is. You're just growing new ability and connections, but it happens. It really is. I've heard the younger generation use the analogy with video games quite a bit, where it's like you instantly get new skins, or you instantly upgrade to the next level, or you get that whatever that special sword that allows you now to slay the proverbial dragon. Where you
Yeah.
just get it's not the normal method of scientific learning. Uh,
Yeah. I think this could be a good time to dive into some specific trip reports because we spoke before the podcast about getting into some of those reports specifically, whether you have them recorded on a journal or you just have them in memory. And you've already mentioned a few fascinating reports where you've met your future self, you've had an alien abduction experience, you've encountered different entities. Is there any for someone who's never themselves had an experience with DMT and has never encountered any entities in that world, is there a good report or maybe a standout experience that comes to mind that you think would be good to start with?
yeah, I think there's a couple that would lay the groundwork. I do want to
Yeah.
start with saying it's not difficult, but when you have conversations of people that have had similar experiences, like it would be easy for people on the outside to be like they're just trying to one up each other's stories, or you hear something about mantis or insectoid entities, and now everybody's talking about them, or because machine elves or jesters were brought up by Terrence McKenna or Joe Rogan, that it's in the collective psyche, and that's why people are talking about them. Uh, I have no desire to do any one of those things. I'm not trying to make my story sensational or to try to one up other people's, and I'm certainly not, and I never would, uh, just repeat what somebody else says to try to add a fictional data point. I'm really trying to share my experiences because I want to try to build my own kind of data base of information and try to get feedback because it does seem that people are sharing kind of similar experiences. So that's why it's when you hear some of these stories, it's like, "Oh, fuck, that's very similar," and it's because I think they're real and true experiences. So
Yeah. And I just want to say before I've personally never had a DMT experience, and that's part of why the reason I find it fascinating because this conversation doesn't just it function as an interesting piece of content or even my own psychedelic research as I move along in life, but it is kind of like the fear of the unknown where it's interesting to talk about things from a perspective of having never experienced it because I really have no idea. And so I'm also limited by my own language and I appreciate you sharing these experiences because I know the language itself is a limiting factor, extremely limiting factor describing psychedelic experiences. And I've had experiences that I would struggle to describe and wouldn't be able to fully describe because I'm doing it through the kaleidoscope of language. So I just wanted to say that I'm appreciative of
Thank you.
your efforts to put these things down for amateurs like me who don't have any experience but can at least have some sort of conception based on, the report that you're bringing back.
Well, I would start with a clear distinction of if there's entities there or not. And that's a very it's not like, well, maybe they're there or not. It's like walking into a theater and, just watching something on the screen that has no characters in it. And it's just, swirling movements, abstract, as opposed to, there's very a clear presenter in front of the auditorium. The So if there's entities there or not, it's not, well, maybe there is. And there are several people that have had done DMT quite a bit, and they're like, I've just never had any experience with these jesters or entities. And it's so that I want to make a clear point is
Mhm.
they're not there all the time, and it's just like if you're in a room with a dog or there's no dog. Like there's either entities there or there's not, and it really is that profound of a clear distinction. So the first several, probably maybe month and a half or so of my DMT experiences were really just exploring that physical space. It was so you'd take your hits, you'd have your sensory inputs change, you'd be kind of exposed to this dynamic realm. But it was more just me going into this space and kind of exploring it myself. It wasn't until, like I said, several weeks or months into it where I got my first entity interaction. And I could see why machine elves or jesters were used to describe these by other people, because it's an ambiance and feeling of fun, welcoming, funny interactions, like stepbrother type, gestury, kick in the dick type, ha ha type stuff. It wasn't, there was
Yeah.
no impending doom. It wasn't like a mothery nurturing energy. It wasn't a hard physical, like a masculine teaching energy. It really was like, cool, like, let me show you this space and let me kind of get into that area, or you're welcomed here. And those interactions happen. The best way for me to visualize it, or try to visualize it for you guys, would be as a human consciousness. I felt as though I would pop into this DMT realm when I was elevated and I was vibrating at this special level. And after being in that space so many times, it's almost like I was an animal in a zoo where these DMT entities, or whatever beings were in this space, would kind of be like, Who is this human that keeps popping into this area? Like,
Mhm.
why does he keep coming?" And then once,
And you were the
and
animal
I'm the
in this
animal.
in this
Like,
case.
or I say like a firefly, flashing in a dark field. Like my consciousness would explore into this DMT space, and like here I am as this beacon, being like, here I am. Here's my consciousness in this area. And once that, once they knew that I was there, that's when I started getting the fun, the interactions, the let me show you around the space, and they kind of were there, kind of showing you around like in like the amusement park, like showing you the back of the house of the 3D theater, showing you where all the fun shit was. Um, but it was the
Yeah.
really fun kind of interactions. But there was no um intrusiveness. There was none of the alien abduction type thing. It really was just going to meet friends. And actually, there was one time that, and I mentioned it on a couple other podcasts, where I was pretty deep into a shroom session and I was tripping pretty hard, and I decided to smoke DMT while I was on shrooms. And as soon
Oh,
as I got
shit.
into the DMT space, those entities were like, he's back, and he brought shrooms." So they were like excited to see now how this zoo
Mhm.
animal would look, not only on DMT but then on shrooms. And it was this fun, like, yeah, guys, I'm here to whatever, kind of
Yeah.
be with you.
Is there a way you could describe the shape or the sensation, the makeup of these entities you were seeing within the first month and a half?
Again, trying to describe a realm or
Yeah.
physical space where the crispness in the definitive outline is so profound, but it's moving and dynamic, and it's very hard to get like a still shot of
Mm.
these entities. But I would the happy, smiley, cartoony, typically bright colors, flashing, really, it's conveyance of like telepathic information, not necessarily words. So it's an energy, it's a feeling, and it just seems to be happy, fun, and party like, uh,
Yeah.
not dark.
So not clearly defined, like there's obviously a space where there's some sort of energy there, but it's constant and moving. You couldn't just say, it's a circle or a triangle.
It's always
It
moving.
always moving. Okay.
But I would say, and it's kind of, I know it may sound contradictory, but it's very distinct from the jester fun type entities, from the insectoid slash mantis type kind of mechanics and architects of that, clear and distinct from some of these other kind of archetypal things. And I guess maybe that's a good way of describing it too. Is it really is a like an archetypal group as opposed to a specific like individual. Um,
Okay. Gotcha. And so did things start to change with these entities after the first month and a half or so?
yeah, so they went from showing me the space and being excited to show me around to then there seemed like the curiosity got more towards me and how my inner workings were. And it was so that would go into the space and I felt as though they were they. And once again, who's they? It was still the fun kind of welcoming committee, the welcoming crew that kind of is there to show you around the space. I felt as though they were really interested in doing kind of like a diagnostic of who I was. Again, kind of like an animal in a zoo, where they were really interested in this human, who he was, but very distinct, not human. And this is where the next kind of weird thing that opened my eyes was like, what the fuck was that interaction with what I considered my human self, or my future self, excuse me.
Future self, yeah.
Because you would go into this space, you'd interact with these energies, these entities, they would show you around. Then it started being like, all right, they were interested in you, but there was never any feeling of like sexual, I don't know, like penetration, or it was not aggressive at all. It just felt like, hey, I'm just as interested as you, you're interested as me. But I had this,
Yeah.
and I've only had it once, where I went into that space and I was kind of, there in their area. And then what I considered was me from a future time. And it wasn't, me with a longer beard or anything like that. It was very comforting, very like, yeah, I'm coming in to do a diagnostic. I'm coming in to make sure that everything's okay. And in that experience, I had a very powerful interaction with my energy. Uh, and I came back from that really just with a profound sense of, no lack of fear of death, or excuse me, with no fear of death. Very comfortable to know that there is something greater beyond my own physical body. And it was really just a very comforting experience. But again, mind blowing from, all right, now you're in this DMT space with all these funky entities to, oh shit, now you're interacting with your future self. Um, Again,
Alright, have you seen anyone else that you'd recognize from, real human life beside yourself? Have you encountered friends or family members that, energy you'd recognize as them, or as your future self been the only one?
with that type of feeling, that was the only one. I've had feelings of like myself and other people, like my girlfriend from past times, but nothing like. But even those past times is almost like you watching a movie and you kind of looking down at a past happening. This
Yeah.
was like, who the fuck am I talking? Like, where, what entity am I conveying with? And if I'm feeling as
Yeah.
though it's me, like, how is that even possible? Um,
Yeah. You've talked about in the book how you see the difference between the DMT world and the normal world, and you use words to describe the DMT world, like reality or more authentic, and you can see the normal world, so like the world that we're in right now, the sober world, I guess for lack of a better word, sober, as the illusion. And I was curious, what makes you perceive the DMT world as more authentic, and the sober world, the normal world, as the illusion?
I feel as though that the number of data points. Uh, so if you were to have a 7 or 8 minute interaction, just you and I right now in our normal walking state with our five senses, whatever, use any arbitrary number, we're gonna get 100 data points. When you're in that DMT space and you're elevated like that, you're getting a million data points, a billion data points. There's just so much more meat there to go through. So you still have the normal five senses, the sights, the sounds. I mean, you're still taking all that in. But then what about all the extra stuff? And that's really where maybe just beyond like the woo-woo psychedelic stuff. Like we know that as humans, we only take in a very, very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We know that there's way, a lot of stuff beyond us, whether it be radio waves, microwaves, TV rays, um, there's all this stuff that we're filtering out that I think with DMT, it removes some of those filters. It removes that veil. It allows, instead of taking in 100, like I said, you have 1,000 data points. So you're dealing with more stuff, more input, more. So like, how can that be? You're getting
Yeah.
way more out of it, as opposed to if you're drunk or you're high on pills. Like if you take away any of your senses, you have less things coming in. You're dumbed down. You don't have less information to sift through. You're in these spaces, like I said, you're coming back with so much. So it's not that one's real or one's fake or one's a simulation or one's a reality. It's just, one you're walking around with an AM FM radio, and the other one you're walking around with satellite and CD and
Yeah.
all these extra ways of getting information. So
This may be a useful distinction because when you were talking about walking around and getting only 100 data points. So I do know that, and I'm a scientific layman. I'm not an expert by any means, but I do know that when we are walking around, there are millions of different data points or neuronal spikes going through our bodies, but we're aware of very few of them. A very slim percentage actually cross the barrier from subconscious into conscious. It do you Would it be accurate to say that your perception of the DMT experience is that those data points that would normally be kept in our subconscious are brought to the conscious, and that you're aware of more of them? It's not that more may be happening, but that your mind is kind of like you're ripping off the governor in a way, like everything's just hitting you all at once. Would that be accurate to say?
yeah, that it's always been there. It's just you're now refining your antenna. There's a popular book in the psychedelic space called The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. And he talks about how he kind of was hearing all these stories going on and he wanted to experience it himself. So he took mescaline one day, and he his kind of realization was that really our consciousness is kind of this reducing valve or this filter that filters out so much, such a huge percentage of the input coming in. And rightly so. I mean, it's for our survival. You can imagine just right now, if we had every radio station, every TV show, every satellite thing going through, I mean, we wouldn't be able to have our conversation. If you felt every vibratory hum, if you resonated with every frequency all the time, I mean, you literally wouldn't be able to survive. So it's not a matter of, oh, get rid of the filter 100%, or we've got to figure out a way to never put the governor back on, or that even I always like I don't want to walk around in a DMT state elevated constantly in this vibratory hum. I would never be able to function in society. So it's more just a recognition of that space is there, that we are way more than our physical body, that there are areas of our consciousness to explore that are there and accessible to everybody. And whether it be through deep meditation, whether it be through DMT, whether it be through holotrophic breathing, I mean, there's so many ways of kind of quieting your mind and getting to that internal space where you can pick up more information. But that's really the big take home picture of all of this, is that whatever method somebody chooses, and I know psychedelics and DMT certainly aren't going to be for everybody, but the clarity of thought and the epiphanies that I've had and the perspective shifts that I've had, I think can be obtained by anybody by doing an assortment of different types of methods. But it's really just getting your body and mind to work together, knowing that it's an antenna, that its ability is way greater than. And if you start exploring that, you're going to find out your own ways of doing it. Whether it's lucid dreaming, astral projecting, there's a lot of different ways of exploring that space. But once you've seen it, and this is kind of the what do you do now? It's once you know how powerful you are, once you know, it's whatever, like getting in that car with the governor. Like once you know what it feels like to drive with the governor off and with the rocket fuel and the nitrous boost on, and the trunk with all the weight removed, you know just how powerful of a vessel you are. And I think I've come back from that space knowing that, yeah, I don't need to be this bogged down, plaqued out, negative, dark, nasty shit, fuck, like blah blah blah, and all of that shit. Where it's like, no, I just need to treat my body and vessel like the right machine that it is. And
Yeah.
for me, psychedelics really blasted all of that shit off. But um, like I said, there's other ways of getting there, and it's beautiful once you get there.
You've said that you've spoken with, or I think the word you use is I've conversed with gods, with demons, angels, spirits, sights and sounds. Let's start with gods. What is it like to talk with God on DMT?
Oh, so this is where the limitation of language could
Of
could either
course.
make me sound beautiful or so really I'm trying to put into words my own experiences that will make maybe other people kind of be able to resonate with it. So I started out being really atheist. So I went to college for almost 8 years studying insects, being an entomologist. So I was really data driven. It was very, you can't be scientifically rigid and be religious. Um, then once I graduated college, I really started studying more of the world's religions and kind of getting some of the spiritual aspects of it. And now combining those two with my psychedelic exploration, uh, I think we're all trying to describe the same thing, which is this beautiful, wonderful world, which is really indescribable. And we all try to use our own different groups of language. Just like if I would just describe insects with an entomologist is going to be different from how I would describe it to a 5-year-old kid. But we're all trying to describe the same thing. So when I say God, universal source, infinite intelligence, what I'm trying to convey is that we are greater than what we're part of than something greater. That there is something way beyond us, and it's not a gray bearded man in the sky. I don't I don't follow one particular religion. It's really just the concept of a being or intelligence or energy or information that that transcends the human consciousness and experience, but that we're part of it and that we can tap into it. That we're a facet of that. Um, So I think God, some people shy away from that word. I have no problem using it because
Mm,
I preface it with knowing that that's going to have a different meaning for everybody. But just that connection to something greater than and source. And once you once you connect to that, you realize how just limitless you are, and that how that your potential is just so great. And that doesn't make things go away like bills and stress and parking ticket, excuse me. Um, Again, it just puts it into perspective that allows you to accept everything with grace and beauty and with a desire to learn from it. So God, just that
yeah.
big overarching thing. When I talk about angels, demons, entities, I think that's a step between human consciousness and that greater sense of being where some of it is archetypal groupings of consciousnesses, some of it is, I think, individual entities, uh, but it's something that's accessible beyond our limited space and time dimension that we as a human are in. And I know kind of maybe a tangent here, but like a lot of people talking about these enlightened states, you hear a lot talking about, trying to transcend the 3D to the 5D, or that they're trying to get out of this stupid, dumbed down human meat suit and get to their home planet or whatever. That to me completely off base. The thing is to try to realize how beautiful this meat suit is, how wonderful it
Yeah.
is to be dumbed down by time and space, because that's how we're able to experience the making of the love, the ice cream, the hot coffee, all of those things. But those other beings or sentient, you know, bits of energy are beyond that limitation of time and space. And
Yeah. What is that called? Spiritual bypassing when you just wanna, enter and live in the spiritual realm and just supersede all of the problems that come with the meat suit. I agree. I think that one of the best parts of if you want to call it the spiritual journey through taking different drugs, having different experiences, being a practitioner of meditation is being able to take the things that hit you in those meditative states and states on uh altered states induced by substances and realizing like this is this is the thing that I'm experiencing right now, and I'm not trying to escape from this. Like, I can take lessons from these experiences and bring them back into my daily life with interactions, relationships, conversations in an elevator, fucking being pissed off on the subway, whatever it is, and realize that also has just as much, if not more, meaning than the ultra spiritual experiences.
And if you can get to that point where you can appreciate both and you're not trying to get from one or the other, once again, being in that here and now, uh, it's a very liberating experience. But it is tough. Like I mentioned about how I recently spent a week at the Monroe Institute, where it's a week of deep, deep meditation. Everybody's phones were away. You're hours and hours a day into this space where you're in all these beautiful realms of consciousness exploration. And you could like, if I ever won the the lottery, you could see where I'd be like, yeah, I'd love to just spend my time in this meditative bliss. But I think you're losing the point too, because and there's a great um it's an Akira the Don song, and it's with Alan Watts quotes mixed into it. But it's basically about him saying about like if you would be able to live your ultimate dream, like once you got tired of sitting around being fed grapes by beautiful women floating in a pool with no issues, like you would want some challenges. You would want to go out and try to slay the dragon. You would want to conquer your whatever. And uh as much as it's nice to touch that mountaintop of bliss where you just want to sit there and zone out. And believe me, I've thought about how lovely that would be, but that's not the answer either. And that's ultimately where I'm at that point in my life where I'm trying to find out what is that balance of,
Yeah.
and not only with spiritual bliss or contentment, but also now with money and rat race. Like I went from making a shit ton of money to now I'm making $20 an hour landscaping. From having multiple homes to living in my parents' basement to like there's a lot of shit that I'm still trying to figure out. But I know what it's not. It's not just rat race. It's not driving yourself into the ground. It's not drinking your shit away. But it's also not just zoning out and saying, "Fuck it, I'm moving to Alaska."
Yeah.
And because I don't know. I don't think that's the fullest experience of your human, that your time here to either. It's
Yeah. I I I want to get into the Monroe Institute experience a bit that you mentioned with the meditative. I think it was transcendental meditation, and they also explore binaural beats and sounds during the week that you were there. Did you notice any crossover between your DMT experiences and what states of mind you were able to enter during that meditative week?
well, and ultimately that's why I wanted to go there, was to um, look for other ways of feeling this true sense of being, of humanness, of connection to source, and knowing that I had felt that with walks in the woods, excuse me, that I had felt that through whatever good gym sessions, that that there were other ways of getting getting to this vibratory state of hum, uh, that I now had found and really enjoyed. And kind of like DMT, the Monroe Institute seems to just fall into my lap by multiple people or videos or podcasts, and I was like, oh shit, I got to look into this. And yeah, you described it. Basically, they use binaural beats, so different frequencies in each ears, to get your brain to vibrate at a very specific frequency, with the understanding that with those specific frequencies, your mind and body can kind of vibrate and get to different states of consciousness. And it was something that I really wanted to see how far I could take their methods and how it related to psychedelics. And so I just spent a week there in November, and it was absolutely amazing. It was a group of 25 people. We all kind of created this cohesive group of people that were raw, authentic. We were sharing our stories, and long story short, I think you can achieve incredible, blissful, elevated states of consciousness, including out of body experiences, including remote viewing, including astral projecting, like all the kind of fancy buzzwords that they kind of maybe known for and famous for. Which I didn't have an out of body experience. I didn't do any remote viewing. So I wasn't there to kind of try to reach those milestones. I was really just seeing what more of a connection can I have with my own body. And I think similar to taking a day or weekend off to say, hey, I'm going to spend the, this time with 4 grams of shrooms, or I'm really going to spend it with ayahuasca and explore myself. I think taking the time to spend a day meditating, to spend the time with yourself, that's half the battle. So getting into these quiet, deep areas of meditation, combined with their binaural beats, with their meditative prompts, I found was absolutely amazing. It wasn't the same visuals and psychedelic mandalas that you would with DMT, but the connection to self, to source, to know that there's different levels of your body, that you're way more beyond your physical five senses. There are a lot of take homes that I had from that experience that really matched up with what I took home from psychedelics. Uh,
Yeah. So you were able to reach a level of not, I don't know if connection is the right word, but d- through that week of meditation, you were able to see some sort of connection with the experiences you've had on DMT, even though it may not have been nearly as intense. You still felt some foundational resonance with psychedelic experiences that you've had while doing the meditation.
yeah, their like key phrase or their motto is something effective. I'm more than my physical body, and that's something that for most people you would hear that and then, oh, no way. Like I'm, that materialistic breakdown of I'm just once again that dumb meat suit. Where me knowing from my psychedelic explorations that you are way more than that. That your consciousness is not just limited to your brain. That you are, once again, what we were just discussing, receiving all of this external information, and their technology and methods. Um, Give you a very distinct separation of your mind and your body and your energetic fields. So the similarity there to feel what it's like to have sensations beyond your physical space. So, and they teach you how to play with the energy that's 12 inches above your body. That you have, projects where you're making these light rods and you're trying to move them through space, and you're trying to connect them with your own energetic fields of your body. And again, for somebody that hasn't tried it, or the first time you're doing it, you're kind of like, oh, this isn't gonna work. This is bullshit. Until you do it, and until you feel it, until you're like, oh, that's what it feels like to have my consciousness removed or elevated.
Yeah.
And then one of my bigger questions was they have distinct what they called focus levels. So focus level 12 gets you to some state. Focus level 15 is supposed to be this other state. Focus 21 is when you're able to connect to conscious beings. My question to them was, is there going to be a very distinct feeling between these focus levels, and will I know the difference between each state, which to me would kind of confirm, is the binaural beat technology actually elevating my body to different states of consciousness? And throughout that week, it was very clear that that is indeed happening, that
Mhm.
through external sources of vibration you can get your body to do some really weird things. But part of
Yeah.
that program, and maybe one of the biggest well, famous people that are known to do it is Joe McGonigal. He's the like remote viewer number one. He
Yeah.
did all the famous stuff. But at the end of his career, or well into it, you're able to produce those effects without the binaural beats, without putting on the headphones. And it's similar to DMT, and that was one of my take homes too. Is that they're both endogenous and they both can be induced without any external help. And again, that just shows you the power of our human body, and really kind of the message that I'm trying to share, which is this: once you connect to yourself in a proper way that isn't running from it, through psychedelics,
Yeah.
through Monroe, through, like I said, there's a bunch of ways of getting there. But the common connection that I had to my being in my body was something that it was well worth every penny. And they have a bunch of other programs where you can kind of now differentiate how you direct that energy, which I'd love to go back and do. But um,
Yeah.
knowing that that the power is within, is it. To not look for external sources to your bullshit. And we all went there as a group, finally able to look within and shed a lot of our past traumas and histories, because those binaural beats allowed us to vibrate at a frequency that allowed information to come in, allowed shit to go out, and it was a beautiful situation. And I think it shows the power of what vibratory information can do to a human body.
Absolutely. There's a study on shared experiences and DMT that I want to get into. I just got to run to the bathroom real quick, so I'll be back in
Yeah, I'm gonna do
3
the same
minutes.
actually.
Sounds good.
Alright.
All right, we're back. We're re-anchored.
No pissing in each other's mouths either.
No, no, not first round. That
We're not that
that wa
close yet.
that was the first that was the 3rd round with Chris Cooper. We
Oh,
gotta work
shit.
our way up with, other bodily excrements first. Um, for sure. But speaking of shared experiences, there is
Great segue.
there's oh, yeah, I've done this before. There's a, I just preparing for this episode, I was looking through some different DMT studies or group analyses that could be interesting to jump into. And of course, as someone who's never done DMT, to me, the thing is like it's the entity psychedelic. Like this is the one where you see the entity. So my search geared towards that because I'm very curious about it. And there's a study from University of Greenwich called "An Encounter with the Other: A Thematic and Content Analysis of DMT Experiences from a Naturalistic Field Study." So this is kind of like a group of studies put together in an overarching analysis. And the abstract says that just an overview of the study. They took a bunch of studies of different people and essentially grouped the different type of entity experiences that people had or didn't have. They surveyed 2,561 participants who had used inhaled DMT, which I'm assuming is smoked DMT, crystal. And in this study, out of 2,561 people, 77% of respondents reported encountering autonomous entities during their most memorable DMT experience. And David Luke, the co-author from University of Greenwich Psychedelic Research Center, said, quote, there's a wide degree of diversity of these entities, but also some recurrent themes that tend to pop up more than would seem purely random. Among the most common are, quote, little people, be they elves, dwarves, or pixies. And there are other studies in which incorporate different psychedelics like LSD and mushrooms. And there's a study at Johns Hopkins where 40% of people on mushrooms encountered beings, but it's still, 70% and 40% is still a long way off. And so it seems like there's such a great connective tissue through the shared experience of DMT where such a high number of people are 77% is crazy. Like 10% would be crazy. 10 and 77% is pretty outrageous. Wh- I'm curious like where you think these collective experiences emanate from? Or do you think there's something in our neurochemistry that's being uniquely activated by the DMT that's arousing these entity visions? Do you think it's something specific to the DMT itself? I'm just curious, like where you think these shared entity visions are. You think they might be coming from?
I think it's a combination of culture and the time we're in, and then the individual human experiences as well. 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, it was all angels and demons and things to do with the Catholic Church. Now you hear a lot about aliens and UFOs and interdimensional beings, and I think that's going to tint or shade kind of how people talk about it, which is why again the terms machine elves and jesters are pretty common. But again, I think it's the overall flavor and feel of it all that I know through my own experience. You could be like, oh, I could see where that would be demonic, that would be angelic. I could see where that would be a friendly guiding help, or that would be a
Mm,
manipulative kind of whatever. So again, I think those storylines play out through human experience as you study human history. But there is, I said that there are really distinct groups. And me, I mentioned how I was an entomologist. So when I hear people talk about these insectoid beings and the mantis beings, and even my,
yeah.
my girlfriend who's explored DMT and shrooms quite a bit. She's had quite a few profound interactions with mantis beings, and really, it's something that's shaken her quite a bit. Uh, so, not to say that because I studied bugs, I can talk about DMT entities like that, but I can see how they would say that that's insectoid, and how it's so instead of the typically tinier, once again, pixel elf jester, fun, come and show you type energy. These are more mechanical. They're typically bigger in size or stature. You know, they take up certainly more of the physical space. And in my interactions with, and I've had several, they seem to be the technicians in that space. They tell you how to actually use your body. I've had two, I think, in particular, where there was one where it was almost like a transformer suit, where this being kind of clamped onto my body in that space and was like, "All right, I'm going to show you actually how to use your human body the way it should. So this is how you can pump blood. This is how you can move oxygen through your body. This is how the electrical pulses can go from here to there." And it was this really cool experience of this is what it feels like to to use your body how it's really maxed out with all of its senses. And then I had another one kind of similar where it showed me how to use, in essence, my body as a tool or as an instrument to play and read on the vibrations that were coming through and around me. And it was
Mm.
such an awesome experience to have your body taken over by this other energy or entity, but not in a malicious bad way. To be like, listen, we're just going to show you this. This is how you can. This is you running at a level of 100, not a level of 10. This is you with all of your senses maxed out, not just your five ones in the 3D space. And uh, those experiences are similar from what I've heard from my own friends and family, but again, kind of similar to what you've read through historical and religious texts too, of these interactions with angels or beings that showed you the light, enlightened you, correct? You know,
Yeah.
like what erased your sins. Like I mean, all of these kind of happenings.
As someone who has studied entomology, do you feel like you try to you approach these mantis being encounters differently, like with a more scientific or analytical eye, or is the experience so overwhelming that you can't even think about like, whoa, like I wonder, if these wings are actually, like scientifically accurate, or like are you having thoughts like that, or is it just too overwhelming to even think about?
I would say two common threads would be the more you study and the more you look into it, the less and less you know. So I was taking, 400 and 500 level classes at the end of my college career where I was going deep, deep, deep into insect physiology and all this weird shit. And it seemed to be the more and more I knew, the more questions I had, the more unknowns came with the more knowledge that I gained because there was just so much beauty and wonder. And you went down one rabbit hole and get to the bottom of it and you found out there was three, and that just kept happening and happening. And I feel as though the more I explore the psychedelic space, it's and the more I consider that I know or have knowledge of, it just keeps compounding and compounding. And then the other common thread would be most people would look at insects and think that they're certainly they're not sentient beings. They're dumb. They don't have anything close to a human consciousness, or they'll brush it off as even like the hive mentality of bees or ants, and kind of say that that's not unique or special consciousness. I've personally been in the woods, literally sitting with insects in my own explorations with them, hand in insect kind of. I'm very comfortable saying that they have sentience, that they have consciousness, that they have feelings, even potentially emotions, to even potentially characteristic traits. Um, but for me, with as much exploration as I had into the insects, I feel very comfortable that they are also a part of Source, a part of God, part of this divine being. And if I can extend that love and appreciation and whatever, that we're all kind of from the same space to an ant, it makes it maybe easier for me than maybe for others to extend that to something on the other end of the spectrum. But I think
Yeah.
I would say the ant is just as special as the DMT entity because we're all just picking up and resonating and projecting our own frequencies. But
Yeah.
we all have each one is as special and each one is important to the whole.
Yeah, I can't speak to the DMT I guess, twist on entomology or the DMT lens of entomology, but my wife has actually been studying mosquitoes in Panama for the last 18 months. And so I've been living half time between New York and Panama. And just the information that I learned through her about the ability of mosquitoes to adapt and to use things like highway systems to spread through tires, and how they can adapt with climate and learn to live in different areas, and completely colonize a country within a decade, and change the ecological makeup of an area. It is fascinating, all the things that an insect like just a mosquito can do. And so when you think about that in the broader realm, it's like, what else are we not aware of? Because there's so much where not aware of with human consciousness. What other levels of consciousness are other beings able to tap into?
Well, and then you take it one other level lower or higher. So mosquitoes are studied primarily because of the infectious diseases that they cause. So
Yeah.
it's not them, it's the parasites and the pathogens and stuff like that living inside of them, and they have their whole life cycle and their whole universe and their whole thing going. Then they have some sort of consciousness and sentience, and um, like there's one, and I think it's a fly that injects its egg into a mosquito, and then when the
Is it the screw fly in Panama? I've heard a lot about screw
maybe,
flies.
but when the mosquito lands on a cow or something, like the heat from the animal makes the egg or makes the larva from the other fly jump off and land into it. So it's like it's not just the
Yeah.
mosquito getting blood for its meal. There's so many things going on, and the more and that's the point where it's like, well, how easy it would be to look at the biology of a mosquito. It's like, well, no, there's 100 different aspects of the biology of the mosquito, but then another 100
The
of the nematode worm that's in it, and then the host of that, and then it's like, what level do you keep going where you kind of realize that it is all, we're all
connected
all
in some
connected
way.
in
Yeah.
this weird way of
Yeah.
just, and that's the exciting thing to explore. Um,
Yeah. What's the strangest, most profound entity you would say you've encountered on DMT? Would it be the mantis beings, or does something else stand out?
this, oh, your progression of questions are really good. It's
I'm
really where I
trying.
kind of want to go. Well,
I'm
because I'm
trying.
as I'm bringing my DMT experiences to to try to make it as most current, and they have really grown and evolved over time. But I had one, now it's probably a couple months, that was clear and distinct from the other ones, similar to that experience where I was interact with my future self, whereas once again put just stands above and beyond all the other interactions. I had one where I make it, well, I make it. I think it's similar to what people are saying when they experience alien abductions, and I can see where there's maybe some connection there that I think is worth exploring, because again, I think it's more just human bodies being able to vibrate at specific frequencies to allow for different informations to come in. But so you normally have the take the smoke, as soon as you inhale it, you get the vibratory hum, and then from there it's either kind of sights and sounds, and all right, cool, you're seeing a show, or it's interaction with some sort of entity. Those are kind of the two main ones. If you microdose, you're kind of just maybe laying there with kind of feeling kind of chill. If you go way deep, you're blasting into this realm, and you're kind of, you don't know what's going to happen. This one was neither one of those. This was, I took several big hits, and again, instantly the vibratory hum stopped. But in this particular case, I was just in an area of blue space, in a blue gel, blue whatever. Like I wasn't in my room, I wasn't in my body, I wasn't, and I talk about like sex on DMT and making art on DMT. So I'm very comfortable with seeing how my body knows and feels, and interacting, excuse me, with the external environment when I'm pretty deep into DMT space. This took away all of my faculties and was similar to almost what I read about, like sleep paralysis, where I took the several hits, and then instantly I was in this blue space where I had there was no beings, or there wasn't like gray aliens or anything like that. But I felt as though I couldn't move. I had no control over where I was or what I could do, and I had a really really distinct feeling of like this hot laser sensation go up into the bottom of my feet, went all the way up through my head, and then back out the bottom of my feet. And I was just paralyzed while this was happening. And normally I'm really excited to be in that space because I'm there to
Mm.
explore. This was, what the fuck? Why am I being held against my will? I mentioned how I think I mentioned I've never been in a fight. I've never like been hit. So I've never. This was the first time in my life where I felt physically restrained or that I couldn't move or express
Yeah.
myself, and it freaked me the fuck out. And after I came back, normally there's an integration period where you're kind of sitting there trying to figure out what happened. This shook me to the core for hours. I mean, I was shaking. I had snots running out of my nose in a weird way. My feet were actually hot, and I felt as though. And this is where, going back to, I said like the DNA download or using the analogy of a software upgrade. That experience I felt as though was like a hardware upgrade, where I felt as though I had something inserted into me or scanned over me, or somehow my antenna was adjusted, increased, enhanced. Um, I came out of that experience with nothing but a positive overall feeling afterwards. I didn't feel any aggression, and I really did feel as though it was maybe, like, similar to taking your animal to the vet to get some sort of service done. Like, I was,
Hmm.
something had to be done. I needed to either do something to my antenna, my body, my resonant field, whatever the fuck it was, but it was done beyond or against my will without me knowing. And again, it's never happened again. But that was again trying to just lay that out there as a data point to be like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't know, but it stands above the other normal, quote unquote, if you could call them that, DMT experiences, where it was shit, like, that just happened. You can't forget that, like,
Yeah.
does that mean I was abducted by aliens? Was it sleep paralysis? Did I just do way too much DMT? Was it Christ consciousness being injected into, there's so many different, depending on what avenue you, or it could
Yeah.
be a possession. I've had people like, "Oh, you're fucking possessed now, like, you got a demon in you." It's like, "Alright, well, that's not what I
We
felt,"
all
but,
do. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Did the feeling of the laser persist once you came out of it? Like, did you still feel like something was inside of you, or did that go away as the overall DMT experience faded out?
the bottom of my feet felt hot, but it felt as almost like you I don't know, like, got a really bad suntan or something. Or
Mm.
you see sometime on TV like a new product out to remove rust on metal tools and stuff like that, where you'll see like this laser like scanning over like this nasty tool and it completely removes all the rust, and then it almost it felt like that video looks like, where it was just a very
Mm.
clear starting from my feet going out to my head and then back out my feet. And uh yeah, it left my body in a very altered state where, even and again, this may be anecdotal, but, like, the next day I went to the gym and I felt as though I could do way more push-ups than I normally do. I felt as though my body was stronger. Again, I came away with a positive influence from it, but it was, at the time, not something I was expecting, and it was scary. I mean, to be held
Yeah.
against my will for the first time in my life was not something that I was ever anticipating, and it hasn't happened again. So, I don't know what actually happened that time, but
Yeah. Yeah. How have you experienced time on DMT? Because that's something that I've wondered about, because it's shorter if you smoke DMT than having a full psychedelic trip on LSD or heroic dose of mushrooms. I think you said your experiences have lasted like 6 minutes, 15 minutes, somewhere in that range. I've heard that as sort of a threshold. When you're in the DMT trip, do you do, do you feel like you're anchored in the time of reality? Does it feel like 6 minutes or 15 minutes? Does time get completely blown away? Have you felt the passing of months or years within, sometimes your stories of like, I lived years inside a DMT trip. And so I've just been curious how you've experienced the passing of time when you've been on DMT.
I've never had a negative experience, like I was trapped in that space and kind of was like, "Oh, fuck, I can't get out." I have had experiences where I've, again, like a DNA download or upgrade, where I came out and I was like, I felt as though I just got as much information as 8 years in college as 8 minutes, and I felt a very, real feeling like I just absorbed a long information or a large set of knowledge. Um, but maybe to maybe answer your point better, you do lose a concept of time when you're in that space because everything is not in this three-dimensional kind of reality. That's where it is nice to have somebody there to kind of hold space for you. As much as I'm comfortable doing it alone, I do prefer to have my girlfriend there with me, and not that she helps necessarily like integrate the session or to try to analyze what I'm going through, but uh, to have somebody be there to be like, it's okay, like you're coming back, start to breathe. It's because you kind
Yeah.
of you kind of can get lost in that area where you don't know really where you are in the trip. But
Yeah.
I've never been in that space and panicked and wanted to get out. And maybe that's a good answer too, is that I've always wanted more time in that space. I've always every time I'm coming back, it was like, oh, I wish I could stay there longer. And that's the exciting part of the DMT extended state kind of thing, is that they're able now to keep you in that elevated state for
Yeah.
a long amount of time. But um, and you do, like I said, I've had some things where I felt as though I traveled back into past. I don't know. Again, it's trying to sound less crazy as possible. Is it past lives? Is it just me having a vivid dream? Is it just me? I watched a movie about some Western guy, so now I'm thinking I was a Western guy. I don't necessarily say that I know the actual answers of all this, but I have felt really distinct feelings of experiencing different times when I'm in there. But
Yeah. Yeah, you do say, like, to say it as less crazy as possible, but I feel like in the book, you do use a lot of practical grounding language to describe these experiences. Like, you use this phrase only once in the book, but I thought it did a really good job at describing to someone who's never done DMT to have to give them a perceptual foundation of what a DMT experience may be like. And you use the word, or you use the phrase, cosmic twitch. And I've don't I like to me, everyone's gonna hear that and have their own personalized view of what that phrase mean. Like when I first read that, I was like, okay, like cosmic twitch, like a twitch is kind of like a pulsating. There's like an aliveness, but like a cosmic twitch, it's kind of like a pulsating in the fabric of something. So I think you do use a lot of practical language, like the cosmic twitch, that sort of gives people an entrance into that world that isn't, quote unquote crazy.
well, thanks for saying that, because it is. How do you describe something that really is indescribable? But when I say the cosmic twitch, because it is this dynamic pulsing movement, and it's sporadic, and it seems like there's no rhyme or reason to it, but it's so defined and so clear and so definitive at the same time. Where yeah, it's just the pulse of the cosmos, the universe, and it's moving in its own kind of thing, and you just to see it and then to be a part of it and then to connect to it and then to flow in that state. It's it's beautiful. um
Yeah.
I mean, it's like watching, a stick float down a river and go through all the different whirlpools and all the different kind of ebbs and flows, or seeing a stick that's stuck trying to stop it, and you're not experiencing any of the beauty and the flow, and you're just that
Yeah.
rigid stick. And once you realize that we're all part of this dance and this flow and this twitch, DMT really, and you know, talk about trying to visualize what happens. Like that movie, They Live, from back in the day. Maybe I'm dating
Mm.
myself, but it's with, I think, Roddy Piper. He's an old wrestling
Yeah,
guy.
wrestler. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the whole premise is you put on these glasses and it makes like the real alien, nasty, negative people be exposed. And I feel like DMT it's kind of like glasses like that. You put this DMT lens on your reality and you're able to see. So with that movie too, when you lift up your glasses, you can still. So right now, I can still see my normal Adam Butler prior DMT life and experiences and humanness. But now that I've added or had those glasses, or can get access to those glasses, I just know there's so much more, and that dictates how I interact with myself, with other beings, with energies, with animals, with plants, with everything, because I've seen now that cosmic twitch and the fabric of kind of how it's all there. Not to say I
Yeah.
understand it, who made it, how it works, or any of that
Yeah.
shit, but I know that there's way more to explore than just what we've been taught in school and what society kind of dulls us and dumbs us down just to blah, like so.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to compose or create anything while peaking on DMT? Like a work of art or anything?
Orgasms.
That
Lots of
counts.
sex. Um,
That counts. Let's get into that because I know that, it's also a big part of the book. That's, a canvas, a sexual act.
I think that there's 2 ways of maybe using DMT in that, expressive or creative state where do you actually do it while you're kinda tripping and whatever, creating music or creating poetry or maybe even art while you're I think there's something to be said doing that. Uh, I can only imagine the how the source would be able to come through when you're doing it in that state. Uh, I think there's probably just as much or more though to be taken out. What happens after the quiet contemplation of the artist, of the scientist, of the architect, of the doctor, after a week or a weekend ayahuasca trip, or several, profound deep trips into the DMT space? How are they going to approach the problem of autism from a different perspective? How are they going to approach this whatever, these major problems in a
Yeah.
different light. So there's a lot of aspect, to how we can open up our mind. But as far as, using it uh, to get into a flow state, I think DMT is fantastic to kind of set it off. So when I'm about to write and when I want to try to sit down and bang out a chapter or two, maybe to start it off with a DMT blast to get that vibratory hum, to ask for the universe to help me to resonate with me, and then the creative flow just happens that much easier. But when I jumped right in and said sex, I think one of the ways that I actually do try to use it in the moment with DMT to in that elevated state is in an intimate setting. And uh I think there's a lot of exploration that can be there with your partner, sexual or not. But yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting way to get benefit from this molecule is connecting with another person in an intimate setting like that.
Yeah, because now I'm just thinking about the practical aspects of it because you need to choose what position you're gonna be,
Yeah.
in. When are you taking the hits? Like, are you
Right.
doing it before? Are you doing it mid-thrust? Like, walk me through a DMT sex session.
So I talk about my first kind of not necessarily embarrassing. It was informative session. So the woman that I was speaking with earlier, she's the woman that wrote the 2 chapters in that book. Um, the plan was let's try to time orgasm with peak sensation. So middle of our session, right before I'm about ready to blast off, I'm gonna hit the DMT pen and I'm gonna try to time the fireworks of DMT with the fireworks of orgasm. That's what we had planned that first night. Well, right when I'm like, all right, this is the time, I took a rip of that DMT pen and instantly, and I say this in the book, like all the blood went from below my waist up to my brain. My erection completely went away. I was just instantly just this like in this space, like, what the fuck am I doing? Had no
Yeah.
control. Like having sex was kind of the last thing on my mind.
The anchor turned to
The
rubber.
answer, yeah, it was fucking useless. This was, yeah, this was actually pre-Anchor, but
This is
um,
pre-anchor. Alright,
no,
that's the problem.
the but it was luckily the woman I was with, and once again still am, just realized that, all right, let's hold him, give him his space, let him enjoy where he's at. Certainly not make, try to push it or try to, clearly this wasn't going to fucking happen. But again, the beauty of DMT is it only lasts several minutes. So I started coming back. We kind of had a laugh about it, being like, all right, well, we've got to come up with a different game plan because, uh, it's going to be tough to try to time it exactly like that. So then we decided, well, let's try to microdose it as we're building as we're doing foreplay, as we're kind of building the intimacy, and that's where having a vape pen can come in really handy. Where my preferred way is actually just smoking crystals in a pipe because you can really blast it and kind of go real deep. But as far as using with art, sex, the vape pen makes it really controllable. So then we started. Well, let's just take one hit, pass it to the other person, and just see how that feels. And then you started being more comfortable just pushing the level of vibration. And then your personal vibration started mending, with your partners. And we were able to kind of sync our breathing, to sync our pulsing, to sync the way our blood was working. Sexual, but also in a non sexual way. And it just
Mm,
became very easy to then let's push it to 2 hits, to 3 hits, to like I said, not trying to be too graphic, but let's lay in the 69 position and let's just chill out. And you pass it, and you're really able
yeah.
to
take a hit of that 69 pipe.
Yeah, but I mean, once again, you got a beautiful fucking woman in front of you, on top of you. Like, if you can play with that ebb and flow, and and practice, like, same thing with like tantric sex, or tantric whatever, where you're really trying to just play with those levels. And that first day after that, kind of like, all right, we're not going to time the fireworks, but let's try to do this. That connection that we had, and then the afterwards of kind of like snuggling and integrating it and talking all about it, we realized very quickly that that could be an important part of our relationship routine, as well as our sexual kind of interactions. And over the years now, we use that quite a bit, where I'd say that the main thing is, like we said, share it, microdose with one another while we're both kind of doing things to one another. Or now we'll do it where one person will go pretty deep into the space. It'll kind of be about them in the DMT space, and the other person is there to almost service them, and to kind of just make
Mm,
them, whether it be rubbing their feet, rubbing their back, going down on them, whatever it may be. But they're
yeah.
in this really cool vibratory state, and they're not asked to do anything or perform anything or to get an erection or to do. You're there being loved
Mm,
on. And man, to be in a comfortable space, vibrating in that endogenous DMT hum, with your own endogenous DMT getting elevated, while you have somebody just
yeah.
imparting love on you, sexual or
So
not, is awesome.
s so sometimes you're there to put the D in DMT, and then other times you're just there to
Sucking it out.
service and be there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
be there and support.
And it's,
That's fascinating.
depending on how like kinky you are and what you want to get into it. But I know me and my girlfriend both have areas where we really push it to experience each other in a pretty deep way, where yeah, I've experienced this woman's body in a way that I've never experienced, anybody else's like that. And it's
Yeah,
awesome. It's way beyond orgasm, or just normal sensory stimulation. It's a connection in a mending of energies that's it's beautiful. It's poetic. It brings so much to the intimacy. And especially if you're trying to prolong the experience. Both DMT and shrooms, I think, can really turn a, for some people, if they're struggling for 5-10 minutes, I mean, you can turn that into 5 hours if you wanted.
yeah. Do you feel like sex on DMT can dampen, quote unquote, normal sex? Because I've heard people talk about, having sex on Molly, and then after that, it doesn't feel the same. Do you feel any sort of dampening effect with sober sex, or are you still able to enjoy it just as much?
No, I haven't had any lessening of it. I would say maybe even and we talk about how great it is and how wonderful all this is. With all the times that I've done DMT, it's never become easy. It's never something to take lightly. It's, if anything, it's even as much as we've done it, it's still like, oh shit, are we ready for this? And honestly, a lot of times I'll plan on it. Even I haven't been to that space now in a couple weeks, several weeks, which for me is kind of odd. I've
Yeah.
been. It's just, when it's not right, or a lot has to happen where it's not just something willy nilly, like, well, she's coming over Friday, so we're gonna smoke DMT. It's like, if everything doesn't quite vibe, I typically shy away from it. But when it does vibe and it does call you, it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I wanted to get into as we start to end off, going off of the planning. I wanted to get into the safety aspect and like the importance of approaching DMT and psychedelics with caution, because I feel like that can often get left out of the conversation with all the destigmatization going on, and I think that's great that more people are having access to psychedelics, and we're able to more fully study psychedelics to get a handle on the effects. But uh, there does sometimes feel like there's the undercurrent of the safety and using caution when approaching these potent, powerful substances can get let out. So I'm curious, like, what your approach is to DMT sessions when it comes to exercising caution or making sure that you're in the right state with other people who may be interested in it. How do you handle that conversation? Like, what's your overall approach when it comes to the safety of DMT and psychedelics?
I would first say, and I start my book with a disclaimer saying that psychedelics aren't for everybody, that DMT is definitely not for everybody. But if you are interested in it, and you want to explore, I would say definitely start off with as much education as you can. Obviously, have respect and reverence, and that doesn't mean you can't use it in a party setting or for a concert or to enjoy sex or to create art. Um, but I think you really need to be very specific on what is the intention on why you're doing it. And for most people, it is therapeutic or mental health or trying to overcome some sort of trauma or to put something into perspective. And it's really important to set that intention. Now, the basics are the environment and the setting. So make sure, that it's not too hot or too cold. Make sure they don't talk about mosquitoes. You don't want a room full of mosquitoes if you're going to start trying to, trip off into DMT. So a lot of it's
Yeah.
some basic stuff. Uh, have pillow, have blankets. Do you want to have sights and sounds, or do you want to be in peace and quiet? And each one, it's a subjective, answer for each person, and it will change depending on what your intention. But every time I go into this space, I have at least a 15-20 minute prayer gratitude session. I thank you for allowing me in this space so often. If possible, can you share this information with me? Uh, I try not to go in there with any kind of demanding, like you're some sort of hot shit, because I have had that kind of smirk smacked off my face before, where it's just like, yeah, nobody, like, we're in control of this space. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, just to and even we talk about, like, the laser experiment. That was one of the things when I first, like, did it. I was like, "Alright, well, I'm the DMT guy. I'm gonna smoke it. I'm gonna look at the laser. I'm gonna write an article on it. I'm going on this guy's show." Like, it's just whatever. Just go smoke DMT and look at the laser. The first time I tried to do it, I went too deep into that DMT laser space, and it was like,
Yeah.
"Nope. Like, you need to sit back." I rolled over. I kinda got in a fetal position. I grabbed my pillow, and I was like, "Yeah, well, this," because it's almost like I went into it being like, "Oh, I'm just gonna see the laser and let's just do this and kinda get it over with." And that that will that will smack you back, where it's really important to know that you have access to this cheat code on reality, that you have this instantaneous where you don't need hours of meditation, you don't need to go to the Monroe, you don't need to, like, you're getting exposed to this level of knowledge and information and vibrational energy instantaneous. And if you ever take that for granted, uh, it can be, I mean, I've never had any, like, terrifying where it's like, "Oh, fuck, I'm never going back into that space." I've never been kicked out necessarily yet, like, where angrily, but, yeah, it'll scare you. I think
Yeah.
I have a quote in my book about it's rocket fuel, and it can just as easily blow up the rocket as it can take you to the moon, and it's true, like, if you don't contain it properly, it's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, that's something that I think about now, as I get older and gain any semblance of wisdom, even though, I'm 31 years old, so I'm still, dumb as fuck when it comes to the acquiring the wisdom of the world. But in my limited psychedelic and drug experience, something that I think about more often is before I'm having a strong or before I engage in a stronger experience with substances, I I recollect on how fortunate I am to have a pretty good mental state or even an okay mental state most of the time. I don't want to underestimate the power of walking through life with a pretty solid mental state. And by engaging in strong drug experiences or strong substance experiences, I'm risking shattering that. And it's not a total guarantee that the pieces will be put together stronger than they were before. And if I'm willing to take that risk, I will, and I know that risk going in, but I did not think about that, when I was younger, when I was 17 or 21, 20. I was just like, of course I'm going to
Let's
come
get
back
fucked
in
up.
this yeah, of course I'm going to come back in the same or better state. Like, of course. Like, and then, I've had my own experiences with anxiety and going through these like hyper anxious periods of my life where I experienced states that I never want to revisit for that extended period of time, and that kind of was like a wake up call of like, all right, like it's not a guarantee that I will just always be able to come back to where I am now. There are risks involved with taking certain substances, and not to say, not to overblow these risks or fear monger, but that's something that I remind myself that when the pieces shatter, it's not a guarantee that it'll come back the same or better than before, and knowing that if I'm still willing to engage in that this experience, I have to acknowledge that first, and once I acknowledge it, then I put it aside, I'm like, "Alright, let me enjoy this experience," but that's something I would never think about 10 years ago that enters my mind state now.
If I could add to that, I think there's maybe two perspectives too of that same topic. Where is one like a physiological burning out where you fried your mind, or you have a stroke, or you overdose and you actually die, or something bad happens that retained with your in your physical body. And yeah, that I mean that is a risk, by all means. But I also think there's that risk of potentially shattering or blowing up your life. And like, I've got friends at 44, I've got friends now that have been married for 20 something years. They've got the same wife that's whatever. And I'm not talking to any of my specific friends, but you can kind of put this in there where it's like you can imagine the guy that's not getting laid, who hates his fucking wife, who never wanted to be a kid, who wants to fuck all these young hot girls, who like doesn't have time for himself, like is constantly getting bitched at. Those people, if they do shrooms, I mean, they may have the realization like, "Fuck this. I don't want this wife. I'm gonna tell my boss to go fuck himself. I want to do more than
Yeah.
coach my kids' little league, fucking whatever." And so you can come back from these experiences and kind of have your life shattered or blown up in that way. But I would say if you go deep into the psychedelic space and you're having these proverbial mirrors held up to you and you're coming back with some of these lessons, well, maybe you shouldn't be with your wife. Maybe she's a cheating whore. Maybe you should quit your job. It's driving you into whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe you do need to take time away from your kids' sports because you need time for your own golf game. And that may sound selfish, but that's your meditation. You need to go do that. And I think a lot of people are afraid of the actual answers that they'll get. Like in my case, I got the answers of, well, you're a drunk, narcissistic, overweight, belligerent fucking asshole. No wonder why these two women didn't want to be with you. No wonder why you got a restraining order. No wonder why this guy like thought he could fuck you over because he probably thought you were hot headed. Like all of these things where as soon as I told myself that, as soon as I held that mirror up to myself, I was able to then analyze it and then put it in the right compartment where, if somebody else tells you, "Hey, check on your wife, I think she's being unfaithful," but you hear that in your psychedelic state, like, I don't know, and maybe that's a horrible example, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that need to recognize some of the areas of their life that they need changing, and it's not just put it, blind it with another six pack or sweep it under the rug
Yeah.
because it will. And you just mentioned your age, and I'm really emotional and passionate when I talked about people in your age range because you don't have to be 41 or I'm said coming on 45 years old. Like you don't have to ruin your life like I did. You don't have to fuck over beautiful women that once again nothing on them. They were awesome, amazing people. It was me who was dark, nasty, and ugly. And it's like if if people your age could face some of their demons and not do what I did, which is sweep it under the rug. Hopefully, you can prevent the blow up and explosion that I had. And that doesn't mean your life's going to be all a cakewalk and well, unicorns and rainbows, but it doesn't have to be self destructive where you're your own worst enemy. And
Yeah. No, that's a good point. There is the multifaceted aspect of fear where you could have fear on the one hand of, I have a pretty good mental state right now. Is this worth the risk? Maybe I have people in my family that have mental illness. Am I going to unlock some sort of mental illness or, some sort of prolonged state of anxiety or dissociation? And you have the sort of psychological fears on the other end of the spectrum. You might you're hiding from a part of yourself that taking a certain substance or having a certain experience could unlock a truer version of yourself, but you're also like, "Oh, my life's, like, okay, and I don't really wanna shake it up right now."
it's
And I like, you're almost like you're afraid of psychological shattering on the one point, and then you're afraid of the life shattering on the other end, where you might be living a freer version of yourself. But, yeah, maybe that does mean exiting a relationship, or it means making changes that are, challenging to integrate, but better in the long term. So, yeah, that is a
and
good point, that there's fear from many places.
what if it's even you know missing out on great because of good? What if it's,
Yeah.
well, my job's actually not that bad, but you know what if but your passion is to be a movie director and you can affect the lives of whatever or whatever. Like I'm making way more money, but I really want to be a teacher. Well, if your calling and passion is to be a teacher, then be a teacher because that's how you'll get fulfilled. That's how you'll get the daily goosebumps. That's how so sometimes it's not necessarily all going to be, horrible and black. Sometimes it could just be, and this is going to be a tough decision, but uh, I think it's better to have tried something than to have regrets for not trying it, or
Yeah.
be aligned with your true self and have failures as opposed to not have failures, but you never really explored who you really were.
Yeah. That's a good point. I have a so there's a DMT argument or a DMT talking point that I would love to explore with you because I actually would I don't know if against it is the wrong word, but I have a devil's advocate interpretation of this argument, which is the pro DMT argument that I've heard is uh, DMT is safer than other psychedelic substances in high doses because it's endogenous to the human body. And this is sort of what separates DMT from other things like LSD or psilocybin that aren't made inside the human body. And th- in just my, you know, layman's sort of scope of the psychedelic realm, I think this argument actually hurts DMT because there are other things that are endogenous to the human body that could actually be harmful in higher doses, like cortisol or glutamate, ammonia, adrenaline, like things like that, that you wouldn't want to like push past a certain level, and just because it's endogenous doesn't mean that it's actually safer. And I don't know I can't speak to the neurochemistry safety profile of DMT versus LSD or psilocybin, but to me on the surface it seems like the endogenous like locking into DMT as it's safer because it's endogenous wouldn't hold up with other endogenous substances in the human body, and I was curious about your thoughts on that.
I take your point that just because it's naturally made, and you just rattled off a bunch of them, that under high enough doses that could be negative or have negative effects. Um, yeah, I don't think that that's a clear brush off to be like, yeah, it's always going to be the best case scenario, or that there's no negative effects to it. I can say from my own personal experience, just in just a visceral feeling, it felt natural, okay, comforting. It felt like this is something that my body is used to exploring. And I said how very comfortable I am in the shroom space and taking, psilocybin mushrooms. But there is always a kind of like an aspect of my body is being poisoned. That this state is going to somehow fade away and leave, and I'm going to kind of revert back to my original five senses. Where in
Mm.
DMT, it feels like you're not like I said, you're being exposed to something higher or greater. You're not trying to get
So the
out of that space to get back to a
yeah.
normal grounded sense. It's like that space is the elevated, more grounded space.
So the poisoning versus elevation space, that's a visceral feeling, like you
Yeah, I think
sense that when you're on it.
one's removing the veil and the other one's putting on a
Mhm.
pair of 3D
Okay.
glasses or a pair of whatever, fucking whatever glasses to get a certain effect. So one's rose-colored glasses, so yeah, everything's gonna have that rosy filter. Where the other one is like, no, there are no glasses.
Gotcha.
This is the real behind the scenes, behind the curtain type shit. Um, but for from a practical standpoint, just the actual absorbing or inhaling of the molecule feels normal and natural. And from somebody that used to drink alcohol all the time, I mean, as much as I used to love bourbon, it's still you'd have that visceral like you gotta almost like get it down, or you
Yeah.
that kind of like,
The
ugh, or even
acquired taste.
you take too big of a hit of weed and it's almost like, oh fuck, like that's expanding way too far in your lungs. It
Mm.
seems like when you hit that DMT pen, it really is the spirit molecule, the miracle
Yeah.
molecule, the I don't know, it's as profound of an experience as it is, and as much
Did
as it's a sensory overload, it really is seems to bring you back to a normal state or a more natural state.
did you use DMT when you were quitting alcohol, or what did you quit alcohol first and then DMT came along months or years later?
Quit alcohol first, and then started very shortly after getting into the shrooms. So within several months of me quitting alcohol, I started exploring
Yeah.
mushrooms. And for me, 20 plus years of being a really hardcore alcoholic, where on, like I said, on paper I was really successful, so it was really easy for me to kind of hide it all. But
Yeah.
yeah, I woke up one morning on New Year's Eve, and I was just like, never, never fucking again. I'm never gonna waste another day being hungover. I'm never gonna not be at my 100% self. And uh, yeah, it was just a quick cold turkey. And
Yeah. Because I'm just interested because I know there's such a comprehensive and lively space of neuroscience where the link between addiction and psychedelics is being studied, and uh, there's many people who have experienced psychedelic trips and across different drugs like mushrooms, iboga, DMT that say that it aided them in changing their drive to consume the drug that
quit
they were
smoking
addicted
cigarettes
to.
after a shroom trip or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it because I think it either opens up the compartment in your brain, or it creates the compartment in your brain that wasn't there to begin with. And it yeah.
What do most people misunderstand about DMT?
Um. That the power of the molecule is somehow external, and that it's contained within the powder or the ayahuasca or the drink or the bark of the tree that you're going to absorb. I think the real power of DMT is that it unlocks the power, the message, the energy, the connection, the source, the all of that is contained within you, and it just needs to be remembered and released and exposed, not imprinted or smoked or gathered from outside. And that's a really self-perpetuating, beautiful experience that you realize just how divine you are, and DMT kinda just shines that mirror allow to you. And not I don't know if that was a proper answer to your question, but the next
No, no.
logical step of that would be
Yeah.
how I ended my book, and maybe how we can end the podcast, which
Yeah.
is, love thy neighbor. The and, back to the original fuck love tattoo and all that, the nasty ones, and the trust crossed out, I had Eve crossed out,
Yeah.
I've got all sorts of, weird shit kind of reminding me how nasty that was. Um, Once you learn to know yourself and love yourself and give yourself the space to learn, to grow, to be comfortable in your own skin, to have your own experiences dict or not dictate, but color your current position in life, you extend that to everybody around you. You extend that love and acceptance to the people around you. You let other people say this, their piece, and it just becomes really easy to not be so judgmental, to not pick on all the little shit. And yeah, the power with DMT is that it shows you just how beautiful and wonderful you are, and that you're a mirror and a piece of this something greater than. But then so is everybody else, and it allows you to kind of get beyond that hatred, that divisiveness, that negativity that is so pervading our society now. Where once again, the message of love, connection. Um, there is a better way for us to experience our human condition, and it's not running from our issues or covering it with booze or prescription pills. And um, for me,
Yeah.
DMT and psychedelics remove the plaque to finally allow me to love myself. And then now, like I said, it's so ironic that part of my history was so anti-love and anti-people. And not only did I want to kill myself, but I was going to take out portions of the society with me. Where now it's just the opposite. I have nothing
Yeah.
but the desire to share and resonate love, and to figure out how I can shine light on the darkness, because it's all there. It just needs to be remembered for people.
Yeah. To end off, I made a note when we were discussing the DMT experience when you felt like the laser was coming in through your foot and coming back out, and you felt like such a strong um change and a hardware upgrade, as you said, and something about that just made me think about death. I don't know why, but maybe it's because there's such a strong pop cultural tie to DMT and the theories about DMT being tied to the dying process. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you before we ended off. what your thoughts are on the possibility of DMT being this portal to whatever comes after life. Like, what have you ever? I don't know. Has there been an experience where you thought like, yeah, this is the molecule that's like the gateway to the thing that comes after?
Thought quite a lot about this. Read a lot about it. There's an author, Anthony Peake, who's written several books on this. I'm friends with him. I can certainly make the connection if you'd like. He goes over a lot of the literature and science that make these
Yeah.
connections. My kind of take on it is, I do believe that we are way more than our physical body. That our consciousness and our soul, our ethereal construct of who we are, our essence, does go beyond the physical body in this one time and space reincarnation, and that in essence DMT allows that consciousness to experience all these other things. So the entities, the gods, all the crazy shit that we just talked about. And I think to have DMT allow the physical here and now body to get into a vibratory state to then resonate with other information, or to allow access to the next transmutation or step of what that energy is. It wouldn't surprise me if DMT is a big part of that, because it's I think it's probably the lube that opens up the portal, or it's the addition of an antenna that allows you to vibrate at that specific level to transcend this human biological body to the next, or to put you into that purgatory state or whatever it may be. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it allows the consciousness to move on, because it can pick up different states of energy and information. Because ultimately that's what I think quantum physics is proving. That's what uh, you know different theories of science and physics are kind of saying, is that everything is moving, everything is space, everything is there is no solid reality to any of this shit. And how you interact with that space is all based on vibration and your ability to receive that vibration. And DMT has a lot to do with vibration. The actual mechanics of
Mm.
it. There are people like Andrew Gallimore, who's a neuroscientist, that talks a lot about it. Dr. Joe Dispenza, like I mentioned, he goes into like the actual physiology in your body a lot about it. Uh, so there is some good literature that tries to break down exactly scientifically how it's happening. I don't know if they'll ever get a
Yeah.
definitive answer for most people, but from what I've seen on the other side, uh, and I've kind of had some not necessarily near death experiences, but things that have pushed me to limits that were kind of like, oh fuck, where time and space did stop and things did happen. Maybe that'll be round two of our conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think DMT, because it is endogenous, because it is everywhere, because it has such an effect on so many different aspects of how we can input energy and information, that yeah, I think it's a big part of how I get to my next future self that I interacted with.
Well, Adam Butler, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. I truly appreciate it. This has been a fascinating conversation. We've gone from
Dick
anchors,
tattoos to loving our
anch
neighbor.
from anchors to afterlife, coming
Oh,
full
fuck.
circle. I know people will gain a ton of insight from what you said during this conversation. Where can people follow your work? How can they pick up the book? Lay out everything, and I'm going to link all that to the podcast wherever people are watching or listening to this.
So the name of the book is Butler's DMT Field Guide. It's available where all books are found, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everything like that. I would say if anybody wants a free PDF copy, I'll happily send a free copy to anybody that wants it. At this point, it's really about sharing the message, not trying to make a couple bucks off it. So my email is booksbyadambutler@gmail.com. Like I said, I'll happily send you a copy. Social media, on Instagram, and I just started a YouTube channel, both Books by Adam Butler, and really just trying to put out content. But all this is new to me. Like I said, up till a few years ago, I was in the rat race of trying to make money, keep up with the Joneses, and was a miserable fuck. So over the past couple of years, this is all growing and morphing, and I'm excited to see where it all goes. But any type of support or sharing stories, and talk about ending with love thy neighbor. The most rewarding part of this journey in writing the book is actually the heartfelt emails that I've gotten from people saying, "Man, your words really helped," or "You said exactly what I needed to hear when I heard it," or "You showed me something to ask another question," or whatever. And um, if I can help in any way, shine any type of light on your darkness, or if anybody needs a reason to stay on this planet, if they were in that shitty spot like I was, interact with me, send me an email, and I'll be happy to share my time with you.
Adam Butler, thank you so much.
Thanks, Zach. This was fun. This is this was one of the more interesting ones I've ever done. Thanks, man.